Okay, good afternoon, everybody. It's Tuesday, July 16th, the Board of Commissioners work session. First up for this afternoon, though, is a special meeting, and I need a motion to go to a special meeting regarding a resolution appointing an interim county attorney.
Well, we don't need a motion, but
I
I can
don't?
make a motion.
Oh, you can make a motion to go in, then why not? You just made it?
I made a motion.
She just made a motion to go in,
Yeah.
even though we don't, and we've got a second, and I'll say all in favor, aye. We're all in support of this, I believe. Steve and Kelly are online today. Okay, so we are now in our special meeting of the county commissioners regarding appointing an interim county attorney. Do I talk to you?
That would be fine if you'd like.
It seems kind of awkward, but
So
sure,
yes,
go
this
ahead.
is a special meeting, the purpose of which is so that you all can take an action pursuant to the Home Rule Charter to appoint a interim county attorney. I have circulated a resolution that is in front of you all. I also emailed it to Kelly and Greg. They both should
Steve,
have
that would be
Or, I'm
Steve.
sorry, Steve and Kelly. They should have that in their inbox. The resolution that is in front of you has a reference to the Pickens County Home Rule Charter, Section 5.3, which requires the BoCC to appoint a county attorney. There is a Colorado constitutional reference as well as a Colorado revised statute reference. Both of those require and memorialize the requirement that there be a county attorney. Inherent in the BoCC's authority to appoint a county attorney is also the ability to appoint an interim county attorney. This resolution does just that. The timing of this resolution is effective today and is styled and grants the appointment until this board appoints a permanent county attorney. So that's the way it's set out. It also it does recognize our former county attorney John Ely's faithful service to the county for the last 32 years. So
Great.
that's the action in front of you, and I'll turn it over to the board.
Great, thank you for that. So we have the resolution in front of us. I see a hand up. Patty, go ahead.
Right, on the form, on the form it says, approved as to form, and it's got John's name. So
Well,
what,
we'll need to change that. Yep, all the county forms are still have John Ely's signature block on there, but we can switch that to the interim position.
great, because I know Jeanette was just trying to update.
I think Jeanette was working on that.
It's
I
in
pulled this
process.
off of
Okay.
PCIN today, which I also just figured out how to do, so that's good.
Good,
Great. I'll just read the gist of the resolution of the Board of County Commissioners appoints Richard Y. Neely, known as Rye Neely III, interim county attorney until such time as the BoCC appoints a county attorney on a permanent basis and authorizes the chair to sign the resolution, and upon the satisfaction of the county attorney as to form, execute any other associated documents necessary to complete this matter. So we're doing this to stay legal with the state and with our own charter. Our intent was appointing Ryan Neely. I'm going to open it up to any other conversation, but I think we understand what it is. If anybody wants to make a motion, we could start with that, or we could.
I'm happy to make a move to approve the resolution of Pickens County appointing Richard Y. Neely III, the interim Pickens County attorney.
I'll second. Thank you, Francie.
Okay, further discussion. I see Steve and Kelly online. If you want to say something, you'd be welcome to, or anybody in the room. Kelly.
Thank you. Yeah, we're here for very sad circumstances to conduct this order of business today, and I think we will take more time to really celebrate John's life in a way that it's due. This was a really difficult decision, I think, under the circumstances, and because, there are multiple paths to consider. Rye is eminently qualified, and I'm looking forward to working with him in this role. I would think I would maybe ask Greg if you want at the end of this to just sort of explain to the community what our thinking is for next steps in the coming months. But we look forward to supporting Rye as he moves into this position.
Great, thank you, Kelly. I'm gonna go to Steve. Suggestion taken, though.
Yeah, I would like to offer congratulations to Roy on his appointment to the interim position, and I have enjoyed working with Roy for the past few years while he's been employed as a deputy county attorney, and I look forward to continuing working with you.
Great, thanks, Steve.
So,
Is there more? Oh,
and I would offer a motion to, I don't have
we've
the
already got that.
thing right in front of me.
We've already got that, Steve.
Oh, you have it. We
Yep,
just have to vote on it
Francie
now?
and Patty
Okay.
already did it. Yeah, so now what's going to happen is we will, we have to put the position of county attorney open. We will be advertising and then going through an interview and selection process. So we think that's probably going to take at least 6 months, or at least till the end of the year. And that's really all I think I need to say on that. Does anybody else think I need to add anything? I think that's it. And we will operate as usual until then with the interim attorney. We don't expect any changes at this point from the office for now. So I'm going to call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for, congratulations, and thank you for everybody. With that, it's 5-0, and congratulations, Rye.
Thank you.
Change that selection, the signature block, and we'll sign this
Yeah,
thing.
Jeanette's working on them, she told me.
I'll drop it off on a desk. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks,
Okay,
Rye.
so that ends our special meeting, and we're going to come right in, and it's 1 o'clock straight up. We're going to do the staff community presentations. And up first is the Pitkin County Investment Report and Economic Update. Julie Hughes and Scott Prickett are here from Chandler Asset Management. And Ann Driggers, our treasurer, is joining them. We're going to spend the next 45 minutes talking about our economic update and asset management. Welcome. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you as well.
Welcome back. Must have been tough having to come up here.
It's rough, but
It's rough,
somebody's gotta
yes.
do it.
Yeah.
Did you fly? Did you drive over the pass?
Well, we actually had meetings in Steamboat yesterday. with
Oh, okay.
5 county commissioners.
Oh, so you're getting a tour of the state.
Came in-
Perfect.
Yeah, came in from Steamboat. It was a beautiful drive.
Excellent.
It's pretty.
Okay, take it away. And Ann, and I've got leftover carnitas here for you.
Oh, it's already published?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can actually.
Follow on?
I'm gonna have you try and.
Josie, you've changed hats. She had her microphone yesterday. Today she's back on text.
Thank you for your articles, guys. They were great.
Oh, yeah, you bet. Thanks for the tour. Really
Yeah, it was
Was that
fun,
fun?
wasn't it?
It was, yeah, it was great.
That was one of the better afternoons, I think, you know.
I haven't gotten any negative feedback yet.
I
But
think
I
your
will.
quotes were great. Francie, your quotes were great.
What?
Your quotes were great.
Oh, thank you.
Well, while Spaz is getting me hooked up so I can run through the presentation, I thought I could introduce.
Please do.
Would like to? Okay. So I'm Ann Driggers, in this case treasurer for this particular presentation. And with me Scott Prickett and Julie Hughes from Chandler Asset Management, who have been our investment advisors since 2019. So they are responsible for taking care of all of our investments, and here to give us a report on how our investments have been doing, and general economic update. Just so you know, our investments generate income and interest of about $4 million a year. So it's a significant contribution to the organization in the form of revenues. So I will pass it over.
All right, thank you, Ann. So did you want to bring up the
Yeah.
presentation? As is usually the case, I will open up with a brief economic update and then turn it over to Julie for the presentation regarding your portfolio. But
Just before you start,
yes.
I just wanted to ask, since Ann hung it out there, she said we're getting investment income of about $4 million a year. So my question is, how much was invested?
We will
Oh,
just go over that.
I thought you were
yeah.
just going to give me a number. But okay, go ahead. All right, didn't want to ruin it for you.
No
guys. Go
worries.
ahead.
This is my
No.
favorite thing. This is my economics class for the year.
Oh,
So
wow.
thank you for that.
The pressure's on.
The
All right.
macroeconomics.
All right, we're going to keep it simple and to the point, for sure.
Thank you.
In fact, if you want to just scroll to that first page. You know, the last time we were here, we weren't even close to possibly being on the cusp of a Fed easing cycle, but now we are. And I'll go into that in a little more detail when I go through the slides, but I'll frame much of today's economic presentation with regard to that backdrop and how we've changed, especially the past year, in terms of some data that would support the Fed to start easing their overnight rate, which currently stands at 5.25 to 5.50. Half of the Fed's mandate on the following page, full employment. So we've got a couple of data points here, and I know for many it might be hard to read on this screen, but what we're looking at is non-farm payrolls on the left-hand side, and then the unemployment rate on the right-hand side. And more recently, we had a number come out at 206,000, which was a little bit stronger than expectations, but it's just one data point. And with most economic data, you really want to look at the trend line rather than just one data point. So 206,000 again versus expectations of 190,000. Probably more importantly is this 3-month average down to 177,000. And then the unemployment rate on the right-hand side at 4.1%. We have earnings down to 3.9%. So what's important on this page is finally we're seeing Jay Powell recognize that we're starting to see a little bit of weakness in the employment picture. And then on the following page, we have something called JOLTS, Jobs Openings and Labor Turnover Survey here. This is really depicting, we have 8.14 approximately million jobs open, which is about 1.2 per available worker. That orange line you're seeing there is the historical average. So we're still above that historical average in terms of job openings. But again, as I just stated, and I'll probably state a couple more times, looking at the trend line there, we're definitely moving towards the historical average line. So again, this is a data point that one of the many data points that the Fed looks at. And then stable prices is the other half of the Fed's mandate. Inflation page here with CPI on the left and personal consumption expenditures on the right. I'm going to focus on the Fed's preferred gauge of measuring inflation, which is the PCE, personal consumption expenditures. Both core as well as headline came in at 2.6%. The Fed has been stating for much greater than a year now that their target is 2%. So they are making progress towards finally getting to that 2% target. Now the last portion might be difficult to achieve, going from 2.6% to 2%, but we'll see.
What is that 2% of?
That is 2% on an annualized basis, inflation. So,
Oh, it's, okay,
yep, the
that's all.
basket of goods. Yep,
okay.
yep. Shelter costs are definitely a factor relative to what the Fed is looking at with regard to inflation, and that's been a little bit sticky. Then the ever important consumer. On this page, we have retail sales and consumer confidence on the right. Retail sales came out today, as a matter of fact, a new number. It was flat, and expectations were down. Expectations were for negative 0.3. So it's definitely a new environment when most of the analysts that I saw this morning when that number came out said, oh, it's a great number, and it's flat. That tells you the environment we're in and how much it's changed since we were here last year. So retail sales will be an important data point to watch relative to the consumer. Delinquencies are up significantly. Credit card delinquencies, the consumer balance sheets, especially for the lower, half of household income. It's really a struggle to get from paycheck to paycheck for many people. And, it's hard to comprehend sometimes in more affluent areas that the median household income is about $75,000 a year. And so when you get an increase of inflation, which, sounds nominal, it really affects a big portion of the consumer.
Is the delinquency a reflection of the incredibly high level of spending in the last few years?
It's really a reflection that they can't, the equation of income and making the payments on that debt build up and not being able to do that. And also, the lifestyle that people have had and the fiscal stimulus that came out as well. All of that savings has been depleted. So there's numerous factors that are challenging for the consumer as we move forward. And a big question mark is, what's the line of delineation? And what I mean by that is for the upper 25% of households versus that lower 3/4, much of that upper 25% really hasn't changed for the most part their spending patterns. But we're starting to see some of that stress move up the household income scale, and so that'll be definitely a factor to watch.
As reflected in less spending?
As reflected in less spending,
Okay.
also reflected in what you were referencing earlier in the delinquencies and the increase and not being able to make those payments.
Not pay for all those things they bought during COVID?
Exactly. And then we have, higher interest rates that they've been dealing with as well. So there's a
Yeah.
fair amount of challenges in front of the consumer. Nonetheless,
Could you explain about consumer confidence? What is the indicator of consumer confidence?
sure, that's it's a simple survey that is done and talking to a broad range of consumers, and hence the name. Their confidence level with many questions that are asked, and then there's gauged, it's weighted, and also we've got on here, just to give you perspective, all-time high 144.7 in January of 2000, all-time low, as you might expect. Unfortunately, I do remember this, and I'm sure Julie does too, 25.3 back in the financial crisis, February of 2009.
And what are those numbers?
It's 25.3. So historically speaking, maybe using, say, 100 as a gauge relative to what, quote unquote, normal might be over the course of time. So
100 would mean like super confident, and 0 would be like terrified?
Zero has never been achieved, but 20, I'll say 25. I'll say 50 is terrified,
Oh.
If you want to use that term. You can see where it was before we had the pandemic, and it was hovering around pretty high, about 120 to 135 in there. That's historically high. And then, you can see how far it dropped off on this particular chart, and it's also grayed out relative to the recession that occurred then, and it dropped all the way down to 25. So those are the quote-unquote abnormal periods.
But the numbers don't really mean anything. They're just a scale of, they don't
Exactly.
represent people or answers or
Exactly.
anything like that.
Yep.
Okay.
And I'll go back to this with the trend line. You can see here, it's trending downward. So that's the greater takeaway from this than the absolute number. Is it trending upward or is it trending down? Yep. Over the course of time. That's really, even if you're a PhD in economics, I think that's what you really want to take away from consumer confidence. I don't know if you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, it's also a leading indicator for spending. So as you see that confidence level go down, that should be a leading indicator for a lower level of spending. And that 100 is kind of an important point. Typically, when you see it go above 100, that's very, very high on the confidence scale. When you start to see it dip below 100, that's a less confident consumer, excuse me. And the two components are broadly bifurcated into a present situation and a future expectations. So what we're seeing now is that future expectations starting to decline.
Now you're looking at the consumer confidence, the far right end, June 21st through of 21 through June of 24. It looks like it's pretty much vacillated one side or the other of 100.
Yes.
You think it's trending down? I guess it would appear to be if you look at the full curve.
Right. Exactly.
Right, and we'll see what happens. Cool.
And it's reflected in the retail sales for the same time period as well. They match pretty much.
Many times it is. Sometimes there's a discorrelation, but yes, they're, over the course of time, they're highly correlated.
Can I ask a question before you move on too far?
Sure.
Regarding job openings, the historical average, how do they arrive at a historical average, and what does that actually mean? How far back is that historical average going? Just looking at that orange line and trying to figure out how do you calculate that? Is that the average of everything we see on this chart, or does it go beyond that?
Yeah, that's the average of historical average for job openings. Yeah, exactly.
Right, of what we're looking at between May 04 and May 24.
That's exactly
okay.
Right.
So that is the average of the curve we see. I was just wondering if it went back farther than that, but that's okay.
Yep.
That's self-explanatory now. Thank you.
Sure.
It does, but it's also a little bit skewed by the pandemic. So that number is actually probably skewed a little higher than it would be otherwise because of the huge increase post-pandemic.
Right.
Like everything's an anomaly because of the pandemic.
Right, sure. That threw everything off. Okay, thank you.
Sure. And as Julie talked about relative to consumer confidence and a leading indicator, we turn to the next page, leading indicators. So LEI on the left-hand side there, what's important here is third month in a row. We have a negative number, most recently negative 0.5%. And that looks at 10 items, whereas the Chicago Fed National Activity Index, the breadth of the data is a little more expansive to 85 items. And the 3-month moving average there is negative 0.09. There's a lot of graphs, a lot of data up here. Again, I think the key takeaway, I'm going to focus just on the CFNAI, is what it's referred to, on the right-hand side. You can see the correlation relative to the chart, the green line there, to recessions. And it has a fairly high correlation to recessions when it's negative 0.7. So we're still a ways away from that. So what does that mean in terms of this discussion and this presentation? We still think, our firm thinks, that it's likely we're going to have a soft landing. So meaning that we're likely to avoid a recession. There's no guarantees that that's going to take place. But right now, looking at this particular indicator, at negative 0.09, we're not close to that negative 0.7 number as of yet. Although things can change quickly. And, when we're here next year, next summer, hopefully before, but next summer, then maybe it's drifted downward and maybe hit the negative 0.7 number. But it's not our base case. We don't expect a recession.
So while you're talking about that, just with the way things move and the way information moves and way things shift, does it ever feel like you need to you don't have to check in with us, but how often do you check in with Ann? How often do we review what's going on? Because we're not going to wait a year, right? You're looking at it every other day or every day or every 5 minutes.
I was really referencing physically being here.
Right.
So
right. Thank you for that.
I'd actually like to be here more often, but that's not the case. But yes, we check in with Ann frequently.
Yeah, basically they follow the investment policy which you've approved, and it's fairly, conservative, as is required of governmental entities. And so it's not like, we're saying, let's go buy this today because we think it might go up, like that. It's fairly steady, and you can talk more about your plan. But every time we have a maturity, we get together and we talk about how we might invest it next, and following the benchmarks that we've set out for performance and following the investment policy. So, and that usually happens
Sure.
probably once a month, maybe.
About monthly.
I have a question on the activity index, economic indicators. So you only have two hard numbers that you rely on, it looks like, and then you have the weak consumer sentiment. So that is really squishy to me, sentiment. And so, but then you also have the new orders and the lower building permits. So I'm just wondering, is that another response to surveys, that sentiment?
Yeah, we take into consideration much more than what we're presenting today. You know, like
yeah.
the University of Michigan sentiment survey as well. That's something that we review, and Julie sits on the Economic and Market Analysis Committee. I co-chair it with another co-CIO. So all the data that comes out in a particular week, for example, we include in a weekly meeting that we have every Friday morning and analyze that data. And then it depends on the circumstance, but then we also, the same group, puts together, kick me under the table if I go into too much detail here, but we have something called a horizon analysis model. And so we go through 9 different scenarios based on the data that you're talking about in terms of considering that data beyond what we're presenting today. And it really gives us an assessment of where we think the duration should be in your portfolio or how your portfolio should be structured based on our outlook. And we really focus on not too far ahead, typically 6 months ahead of time. And where and how we want to structure the portfolio. That's taken into consideration, and when Julie or I call Ann, that is in the back of our minds relative to the particular recommendation that we discuss for your portfolio.
Well, I know I mentioned this last year when you were here as well, but it seems like economists are really pessimists and that there is no optimistic report ever. Even when things are really, really rosy, the New York Times always says, blah, 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 but watch out.
Yeah.
So is that pretty much what goes on? Things look good, but?
Well, when you when you're an economist, but I think more importantly, when you're in the bond market and almost exclusively in the bond market, you inherently, I learned this, first few years out of school, want things to go bad because you want interest rates to come down because prices go up. It's just a point of
So
reality.
it's a good but, not a bad but.
Yeah. You guys
They're all
always
bad
bring up the
buts.
most interesting questions. I love it, but anyway.
Well, I resent the but kind of because it affects elections and stuff. It just makes people pessimistic about the economy. Whether the economy is helping them or not, they think it's not because of the inherent pessimism of economic forecasts.
Yeah.
So that's why I resent it.
I do think that's prevalent, and we do try to take a look at the brighter side. I think the brighter side is rarely has the Fed avoided a hard landing. So
Yeah.
a recession when they've had a tightening cycle. So far, and I'm not saying they're going to avoid it, but so far it looks like they might do that. Well, that hasn't been achieved too frequently since 1966. You can say 1984, and one could argue two more times since 1966. Boy, that's pretty positive. That if we can get through this through the end of the year and not have a recession, and into next year and not have a recession and still have a fairly strong consumer and just a little bit of weakening, enough for the Fed to lower rates, maybe twice, maybe 3 times, whatever they deems appropriate, that's a lot of good news.
I think you should write that article for the New York Times.
Okay.
But Francie is going for her PhD in economy as an economist, so just so you know that.
No, definitely not.
Okay. So that is very good news.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Sure.
I'm going to remember that you said that.
And then housing. Housing has been quite a, you're going to give me a different paradigm now when I do the rest of this
You
presentation.
can't count Aspen in any of this. It's like way
Yes,
out on its
exactly.
own.
That has to be
That's for sure.
bifurcated out
Yeah.
relative to housing especially. But supply still is a significant issue across the whole country. Annualized housing starts down 5.5%. And then on the right-hand side, we have the Case-Shiller 20 City Composite Index, up 7.2%. Again, tight inventories, the supply is a real significant issue with regard to that. And just anecdotally, with my own daughter talking about her, lack of confidence in terms of ever buying a home, all of her friends that are in their 20s ever buying a home. It's an unfortunate situation we're in right now in terms of the housing market and home prices for sure.
See, Greg, well, we kind of see a lot of things with housing in our community, but see some of the shortages coming from people that this isn't their primary residence, that this is their third or fourth or maybe more home. And so that's taking those out of the market for other levels of people who could be living here full-time.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that especially in our resort economy or our communities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure it does.
The multifamily home starts declination is terrible.
Yeah.
Definitely. On the following page, we have something called survey-based measures. It's the ISM for manufacturing and the ISM for services, Institute of Supply Management. Really, to simplify it, taking a look at just manufacturing, it's 48.5, so that's in contracting territory, another indicator, and then also the services side, also in contraction territory, below 50 at 48.8. So that's an important takeaway there. Then the GDP, gross domestic product, we had the final third quarter come in at 1.4%. The consensus estimate, which is on the bottom part of the paragraph there, calls for 2% growth in the second quarter and 2.3% growth for the full year 2024. We'll see how that gets adjusted over the course of the remainder of the year. Most likely it could be adjusted downward, but we'll see. Again, we got a little bit of a surprise relative to retail sales today. And then the Federal Reserve. On the following page, we have the balance sheet on the left-hand side, which is currently being reduced by about $60 billion a month. And then we have the effective Fed funds rate on the right-hand side, currently at 5.25 to 5.50. Again, our opinion is that the Fed is likely to begin their easing cycle this summer. Most likely the Fed meeting in September, on September 18th to be exact, is likely to be the first Fed ease. If they deem it appropriate to ease a second time this year, most likely it will be the December meeting, because the November meeting is so close to the election. So highly unlikely, not unheard of, but highly unlikely they're going to go down that path and lower rates so close to the election, but possibly in December. And then if they, again, think it's still appropriate to continue the easing cycle, then January reflects, and the Fed funds futures currently reflect another ease in January as well. So that means, right now, the marketplace is reflecting 75 basis points between now and January, where the Fed would move the Fed funds rate downward.
That would be good.
And then on the following page, we've got the Treasury note yields on the left and the yield curve on the right. Currently, the 2 years trading at a 4.44, 5 years all the way down to 4.09, and the 10-year at a 4.17. It's likely we're going to see the shape of the curve flatten out, and we think the curve is likely to flatten out by year end. We won't see this inversion that we've seen for the better part of 2 years on your slide there on the right-hand side. In fact, there's a chance, we think, that it might even be a positively sloped curve by year end between 2s and 10s, which in our world, bond managers' world, is a much easier environment in which to manage portfolios, especially longer-term portfolios, 1 to 3, 1 to 5, in that type of environment. So, any questions before I turn it over to Julie to talk about your portfolio?
No, thank-
Francie may have some when she gets back.
Hands up, Steve or Pat, France or Kelly, I can't see you, but I don't see hands up. Oh, maybe, are they here? They're here. Yep.
No questions?
Okay,
Listening.
just listening. Great.
Thank you.
Great.
All right. Go ahead.
Great, well, let's take a look at the portfolio, and again, we're gonna cover the managed portfolio that we at Chandler manage for the county, but we'll also touch on the consolidated portfolio, getting back to your question about how much is invested. So starting with the core portfolio that is actively managed, the objective, safety, first and foremost, liquidity and yield or a commensurate rate of return with those first two objectives. And we do measure performance vis-a-vis a market benchmark index that we'll reference throughout the presentation. And the strategy is to invest within those parameters that are defined by the county's investment policy and Colorado revised statutes. So on the next page here, next couple of pages here, we actually have a compliance report. You can see here everything is in compliance with your investment policy and with statute. And we do check that before and after every trade and report that back to you. So let's take a look at the high-level characteristics. This is as of the end of May, just due to the timing of this presentation, but we can talk about where we are today as well. So I'll highlight that second line item, that average modified duration, which is very close to your average maturity, but a better measure of risk in the portfolio. And this is our primary lever, if you will, to manage risk and return in the portfolio. You can see it's 1.78 years at the end of May. That is just short of the benchmark index, which is the 1 to 3 year U.S. Treasury Agency Index at a 182. And given our interest rate environment and our view that rates have peaked and the Fed will start an easing cycle, we, in the last two trades that have occurred since May, have moved that duration to about 102% of the benchmark, which we think is optimal in this environment. So going forward, at least with our current view over the next few months, we will seek to maintain that duration just slightly long. We never deviate too far from the benchmark because that's your risk tolerance, but you'll see it slightly long. And we always articulate that to Ann when we talk about the recommendation, where we want to place it and why. So then you can see your average purchase yield has moved up to a 283, and that's all the historical purchases in the portfolio. So you still have some securities, given that this is a 1 to 3 year portfolio, there's still some COVID era securities below 1% that are rolling off. But that should continue to go up. Your average market yield reflecting the actual market price and yield as of May 31st at a 492, so just below 5%. And your average quality is of the highest quality, AAA, and your total market value of the managed portfolio, just under $75 million. So again, this isn't all of the county's money, but this is the longer-term portfolio portion of the county's money. So let's take a look at a little bit more detail here. This goes between 0 and 5 years for the managed portfolio. You can see the largest concentration between 1 and 2 years, but well distributed across the curve. And it's primarily government securities. So U.S. Treasuries in that purple portion of the bar, U.S. agencies in the dark green, and that comprises most of the portfolio for you. And then on the next page, the positioning vis-a-vis the market benchmark index, you can see your index in the dark green is very strictly between 1 and 3 years, but we have your portfolio spread out more diversified in the short end of the curve between 0 and 5 years, and we think that's more optimal for performance. So more liquidity on the short end and locking in more of today's rates before they go down, essentially, on the longer end of that spectrum. And then on the next page, you can see a well-diversified portfolio between issuers, 71% in U.S. Treasuries, which is the safest, most liquid instrument you can buy. And then we have our Farm Credit, Home Loan Bank, and some Freddie Mac and Ginnie Mae's, so U.S. government agencies that comprise the rest of the portfolio. so very safe and liquid issuers. Credit quality of the highest, U.S. government. So S&P and Fitch both currently rate the U.S. government at AA+, which is reflected here, and Moody's still at AAA, and really no change from quarter to quarter. So highest quality portfolio. Here we have our total return performance. So this goes back to the inception of the relationship at the beginning of 2019. And the green bars represent the county's portfolio vis-a-vis the index in the light gray. You can see there is some outperformance vis-a-vis the index in each period. I'll just as a reminder, this is total return. So this includes your interest income that's generated, but it also includes changes in the market value or the prices of the securities that you own based on where interest rates move. So this is your mark to market, if you will, that has to be reported on financial statements. And you can see that the 12-month performance is quite strong at a 390 versus the index at 346. And since inception, 153 versus 132. Keeping in mind, we were in a zero interest rate environment for over 10 years until 2022. So very strong performance overall, and we expect as rates come down, you will also have a very strong performance as the securities that you already own will go up in price.
I'm confused about that. So I thought that this particular rate of return was dependent on the high interest rates being paid to us for our investments. So if rates go down, how will our performance increase? How does that work?
So what you already own will appreciate if rates go down. So if you own a security at 450, so we just made a purchase yesterday at 430, for example, and that was in the 3-year part of the curve. So when the market discounts for Fed cuts, or when the Fed cuts, that part of the curve will start seeing lower interest rates. So let's say that security goes down to 4%. So the price, so your security at a 430 becomes more valuable. You'd rather own it at 430 than 4%. You wouldn't pay as much for a 4% security.
Right, but I thought I heard you say that as the rates go down, our performance will stay really strong or go up.
It will. So what you own already will appreciate in price.
Okay,
However,
because we
new
don't-
purchases will
Okay.
be made at a lower rate.
Okay,
Does that
all
make
right,
sense? Yeah, it's
I'm just saying, so it's kind of a balance.
it is a balance. Right. So the next page just shows you your historical average purchase yield. So you can see the really, really strong upward trajectory as the Fed was going through the rate hiking cycle in 2022, 2023. All the securities that matured and were reinvested in that time period were reinvested at higher rates. And this, I believe, will continue to go up because you still have some very low yielding securities that are maturing and rolling off and being reinvested in today's environment. Are there any other questions on the managed portfolio?
So are you alluding to a good investment would be a U.S. Treasury bond at anywhere from 3 to 5 year term?
Yes, depending on where it places the overall duration of the portfolio. We don't want to put all
All
our
of it.
eggs in that basket. We don't want to make
Want to
the
diversify our investments?
Exactly. But for example, the last 2 purchases we made were right at about 3 years and right at just short of 5 years, moving the duration on an overall basis where we wanted it.
See, and I'm getting it. It's only been how many years?
You'll
22.
get it until they leave the room.
So when it matures, like I have a bond right now that's only a 13-month bond because it was paying insanely high. So after that, then if I decide to keep my money in that particular bond, then the rate will change at that moment, or would I keep the original rate?
once it matures, if you choose to reinvest in another 13-month bond, no guarantees, but if the Fed cuts rates, or if the market thinks the Fed is going to cut rates, it will likely be reinvested at a lower rate.
Okay. So when ours mature here, these much larger investments, the same thing. You have to decide at that time what to do with that.
We do.
So you have to make decisions all the time. We have things maturing and all the time.
You do. In this portfolio, with an average duration of about 1 3/4 years, we have a maturity almost every month.
Wow.
So at
They have to
every
keep their eye on that bouncing ball.
Yeah.
exactly. So every time we have a maturity, we evaluate the current structure of the portfolio, where we want the duration. Does an agency look better than a treasury? We evaluate any number of things as far as structure before we make a recommendation on where to place that new
It
investment.
would make me crazy.
And do all of those decisions have to be run through Anne, or can you?
Yes.
Okay, well,
Yes, they do.
So it makes all three of you crazy.
As the treasurer, yeah. According to state statute, the treasurer, takes care of the county's funds, so.
Other questions before we move on?
Well, let's keep going. We've got a long way to go, I think. Or are we?
Actually, no, we're not going to
No?
go through every security.
Okay,
So
got it.
that is the bulk of the presentation. We'll just touch on this briefly. This is taking a look at the local government investment pools, and Anne may want to address this. This is the county's liquid funds that are available on a daily basis. So you see the 110, 195, so 110 million liquid, completely liquid.
And the difference between these two in terms of numbers is property tax collections, essentially.
is
So,
probably what?
property tax collection.
Oh.
That's why it goes up
So
so
those
much. And
extra
then
property
by
taxes.
December, well, we collect all of our property taxes within the first 6 months of the year. So, but starting, towards the end of February, and then it kind of peaks in June, and then by December, we'll have spent most of the money.
So you put those right into the portfolio, you don't keep them in the general fund for us to spend?
No, the cash
we
is
don't.
the cash is always available. It's always liquid, but it's part of the general all of the fund balances together.
So can I ask? So what about, we take some of the property taxes we've collected, put them aside in case we have refunds or, challenges that come through that we have to pay, right? So we always have that reserve fund available in case we have somebody who comes in and we have to refund some of their property tax.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll do a cash flow forecast and figure out how much we can have managed by Channel Asset Management, which is around 80 million. And then the rest we move between local government investment pools, which are very liquid, and
So we can
various
always get our hands
banks.
on-
So that we can make payroll and do everything else.
Great, thank you.
So let's just skip quickly to page 29. And this just gives you a snapshot of the total portfolio. So this is all those liquid funds and the managed portfolio combined, which is about $185 million as of the end of May. And again, that fluctuates based on tax collections and various outflows. But you can see that the county has a very healthy amount of funds to invest either in liquid or longer-term strategies. So I won't cover any of the further detail, but certainly happy to address any additional.
Do you want to go through these
Questions?
slides?
Pardon?
Just kidding.
Yeah. Would like them to stay awake for the rest of the day.
I actually like page 32 quite a bit.
Oh, let's go back.
Can we get to actually see what the different investments are?
Sure. So
So
these are,
I have a question.
Go ahead.
We had an issue, I don't remember what year it was, where we had some of our investments where we didn't really philosophically support them. And we cleaned that up, right, with some of our oil and gas kind of investments that,
Yeah, so we revised our investment policy. And so we're now operating under that new investment policy. And
okay.
there is actually a parameter that was added to the
Yeah.
policy to reflect to reflect the views of the county. And there is actually a line item in there in the compliance statement that does not allow investment
follow
in
through.
fossil fuels, et cetera.
Right.
And we have that hard-coded in our system. So if we tried to buy an Exxon bond, which meets your credit quality, and let's say it's 3 years and in, AA rated, our system wouldn't let us do it because we have it hard-coded in that it doesn't meet the parameters
Thank
of
you.
your policy.
Until such time as if we were to change our philosophical viewpoint, which I don't see happening anytime soon.
Any other
Okay.
questions?
I think that's great. We're good. I don't see any onlines, no hands are raised. It's always really fascinating. It'd be great to go through it again, because I barely.
We've never been
hanging on.
asked that before,
Yeah,
so
so
thank you.
do that again.
He can watch it on
I
Grassroots
can go back
TV
and watch
over
it in
and over and
grassroots,
over and over.
exactly.
So do you guys fly up and down on the same day?
We had meetings in Steamboat yesterday
Oh,
for
they're
the
driving.
Cobb County Commissioners, and
Oh,
then
so
we
you drove
drove
up?
from Steamboat to
Oh, that's a
Aspen this
nice
morning.
drive.
That is a very nice drive,
very
yes,
pretty.
exactly.
Did you go Trough Road or did you go
The soft,
State Bridge?
yeah,
It's fun always up there. Yeah, it's beautiful along the river.
yeah.
Okay, Ann, is there anything else you have for us?
That's it, thank you.
We're done.
Nice to
Well,
see you
right
guys.
on
It's
Nice
schedule.
to see you too.
We like
You have
seeing you in
about
person.
45 seconds left. What do you want to do with it?
Sounds like NPR. We have 20 seconds left. What's your opinion?
Yeah.
On the
Well,
world
thank you
as
so
it is
much.
today.
Kelly, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. No, Ann, can you remind me of what the composition of our don't we have an investment board or, I don't know if I'm
We have a
misremembering.
retirement.
We have a retirement board, which is employee representatives that represent the employees. That's
Baby.
and then the financial advisory board.
So who
Yeah,
looks at
thank
this?
you.
Do either of those look at this portfolio or not?
I'll send the reports to them, but they're not really that interested in it.
Mostly the FAB. It's mostly the FAB rather than the retirement board is kind of a different animal.
Yeah, the retirement board is kind of independent of the county. It's the county employee representatives.
I know RAFTA sits on it and
Well, so we have a joint fund, a retirement fund with RAFTA. And so there are 2 RAFTA employees, 2 Pitkin County employees, the county treasurer, which is per state statute, and then 2 citizen representatives representing the joint retirement board. So we have representatives that aren't necessarily living in Pitkin County because we cover the whole RAFTA zone.
right.
Got it. Great.
Thank you. Thanks. Good to see you guys.
Well, thank you. Thanks for coming in.
It's our pleasure.
Have a
Thank
nice
you.
ride back.
Enjoy your drive back.
Thanks.
Be
Thank you
safe
so
out
much.
there.
you.
Watch out for the moose.
I feel smarter now that
Oh,
you've
good.
been here.
Love to see a moose.
Well, you might if you go that way up the pass, and maybe you will.
That would
By
be a
difficult.
treat.
Are you going home over the pass?
We're heading back to Vail.
Going to
Oh.
visit.
Definitely
I'm
not
so,
going
I'm
over.
sorry.
No,
You
it's-
could probably get there about almost the same time. Yeah, but you won't see a moose if you go. All right, take care. All right, we're doing, up next is the housing funding strategy. And if you don't mind, I need about a 1-minute break, 2-minute break.
I don't mind.
You don't mind, okay. And you can begin if you want. I'll be right back.
No, we're not going to begin. The whole system is down at Fat Belly. That's why I'm like, in and
Oh,
out.
no. is like saying, happy birthday.
I'm gonna look in trash.
Okay,
'cause
what's
I
the
definitely
crisis
didn't see it.
now?
It was,
I didn't get a birthday card
it
from
was
the
2 weeks ago, wasn't it?
Well, we
Your
made a
birthday?
decision in your absence that we wouldn't send you one.
And I believe Kelly's birthday's tomorrow?
Just kidding.
Yes, it's tomorrow because she's not going to Apcha.
Okay. Well, we had to cut back on something.
Happy birthday, not going to Apsha. Good birthday present.
Yeah,
Well-
that's her present right there. Okay, welcome, Ashley. Thanks for coming down. Stairs, that is. And we'll take it away.
Mr. Peacock?
Thanks, Ashley, and thank you, board. So
And I see
today,
Laura's with us as well. We've got Laura and Kelly is still online. I think Steve is still there. Hi, Laura, if you can hear us. Take it away, John.
all right, thanks, Greg. So we've put together information for the board to consider today, whether the county should place a question on the November 2024 ballot establishing a mill levy to fund affordable housing. This has been an ongoing conversation for the board now really for several years. And it's been a conversation, go ahead and flip to the next. It's been a conversation largely because of the need expressed in the community. The art chart that just got put up in front of you is from our 2023 Citizen Attitude Survey. And one of the things that we do with that survey is ask residents or citizens on an issue basis what issues are most important, and then how well are we doing on them, and rank issues by that important satisfaction ranking. So something that has really high importance, but maybe we're not doing as well on, would get a higher ranking than something that was important and we're doing well on, or vice versa. And for several citizen attitude surveys now, affordable housing has been near the top of the rankings. In 2023, coming out of the COVID pandemic, which is something we're going to talk a lot about, the trends that have been happening over the past few years, efforts to address affordable housing was ranked as the most important issue, and was also then, in terms of satisfaction, rated as one of the areas where we're doing poorest as a county. And as such, it's received kind of a #1 ranking for a number of years now in terms of what citizens are asking us to prioritize, spend more resources on, and spend more of our time addressing. And so one of the things that you're going to hear pretty consistently throughout this presentation is that while this board has certainly dedicated time and resources and energy towards affordable housing, we're limited in our ability to impact this policy issue for citizens, largely because of dedicated revenue sources or lack thereof for affordable housing, and other competing priorities where we have funding, for example, in the general fund. And so after much conversation, we're here to propose language for a mill levy question to be placed on this year's ballot. We're going to run through the background information on that. We are going to close the presentation really with proposed ballot language and ask this board for direction on how to proceed. We do have some calendar timelines we're coming up on, so we are going to need some pretty definitive direction today. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to you, Ashley.
Thanks, John.
Hi.
Good afternoon. I'm Ashley Pearl. I'm the Resiliency and Housing Director for Picken County. And as John mentioned, over 50% of those who filled out the survey, and then I think all of us here just being in the community it's a big priority and something that our community would like us to focus on, putting more resources, time, and really meaningful effort towards affordable housing. So why is that showing up repeatedly?
What was the percent who responded?
53% in 2023, and we've seen it as the top 2 ranking for the last couple years before that. So, of course, that's because there's a demand for housing. So here in Bacon County, our population is around 17,000 people. Our workforce is around 18,000 workers or jobs. But we know that less than 40% of people who work or who live in Picken County are actually filling those jobs that are in Picken County. So that leaves us importing over 60% of our workforce from outside of the county. And of course, this has really far-reaching impacts on things that the board cares about, climate change, things like that. It has impacts on our roadways, on our greenhouse gas emission impact, transportation impacts. On the actual people who are doing this commuting, it has quality of life impacts, mental health challenges, physical health challenges. People who are spending a disproportionate amount of time commuting are going to feel that in their wallet as well as in their quality of life. And what that means is that more of our workforce is passing a lot of other economies on their way up to Picken County and going, well, maybe if I could get a job there, I could work closer to where I live. And those jobs are becoming more and more competitive with the jobs that are offered here in Picken County. So more and more people are stopping along the way and taking a job that's not in Picken County. And we as an organization, Picken County, we feel that in hiring and retaining good, high quality employees, and we hear it from our employers. It's, if we thought it was hard during COVID to hire, that trend has only continued. So of course there's a demand for housing, and not all those people who are driving up and commuting up to Picken County want to live in Picken County, right? That's not 100% of our goal, but many of them would like to live closer to where they work. And so that leads to supply. And frankly, if you look at some of the supply numbers, we look a lot better than some of our peer communities. We have 3,500 deed-restricted units across Picken County, Apsha, Snowmass Village, and that doesn't even count employer units that are not deed-restricted, that are just supplied by an employer to their employees. So estimates are around, we have deed-restricted units for about 20% of our workforce. And on some more recent data that we did, we estimate around 30 to 35% of Picken County's voters actually live or benefit from affordable housing. So when you look at supply in a bubble, we've been at this for over 40 years, and thank goodness, because we actually have some units to serve some percentage of our workforce.
Are those numbers accumulative, or are some of the 20%, the 30%, and so on?
Those are separate. So calculating the deed-restricted units for our workforce is a comparison of the number of units to the number of people working here. The voter data is very, very different.
So it's 50 to 55% are in either deed-restricted or?
No.
That's what I meant.
Yeah,
So they're
separate.
the same people?
Yes,
Okay.
same people, most likely, yes. So we're looking okay, but we still see that over 50% of people who took our survey, and I don't know, for you all, over 70% of people I meet on the street say, why aren't we doing more in housing? We have a housing crisis, we need more housing. And some of the data really explains why. So we have some supply, we have some demand, but the ability to attain or to acquire that supply is very limited. So our average annual wages here in Picken County is just under $80,000. The median listing home price last year in Picken County was $3 million. And that is brought down because there's a number of deed restriction sales in that data. So if you took out APSHA sales from that number, the median listing home price of free market units in Picken County is actually much higher than $3 million. In Glenwood Springs, we see that around $900,000 was the median listing home price in 2023. So when you look at what that means for people looking to buy homes, we use the calculation of AMI, area median income. So if somebody is very average, a family working, they are making 100%
Nobody in
of
this community is
area
very
median
average.
income.
This is definitely not Lake Wobegon.
Extremely special, but making exactly the middle of the line.
So if they're making 100% AMI, so around $90,000 for a family, or a family of two, they can afford a home that costs $325,000 in Pickens County without being cost burdened. So the cost burden for housing, as we say, housing should not cost more than 30% of what you make. If you are making double the AMI of Pickens County, you can afford a home that's $650,000. And if you are our highest income earners, you're making 300% AMI, you're making $300,000 a year, you can afford just under $1 million home. Again, the median price in Pickens County for a home is $3 million. So that's tough. That means either you're extremely cost burdened or you're not owning a home. Or you're looking at our neighboring communities. You're looking at Garfield County where the median price is closer to $900,000. So those high income earners, just barely making it if they want to get that median home price. So what this does is it means that the percentage of homes available is decreasing, not just in the Roaring Fork Valley. So the Roaring Fork Valley is the light blue line here. We know that in 2015, a whopping 23% of our homes were at least attainable for those making the median wage. Now we know it's below 9%. And what we used to rely on was that folks could at least go further down valley and maybe they could attain, this American dream of home ownership outside of the valley, in the Colorado River Valley. But those home prices are not what they used to be either. And so we're seeing our workforce here in Pickens County, if they want to own a home, going further and further and further away until you're an hour and a half, 2-hour commute one way. And then we have to ask ourselves, what are we doing here? And what is the quality of life for those folks? And what's the impact? And so the way I think about this is if we were in a, again, normal, average, regular community, this is what a traditional housing continuum looks like. So if you're very low income, you hopefully have some emergency shelter, transitional housing, something to help you. Lower income and moderate income folks are in affordable rentals, subsidized rentals. And then in a typical community, you see people who are at that 100% AMI getting ready for their first home, to buy their first home, or at least being in free market rentals. And then as you move up that AMI continuum, seeing people really being able to afford home ownership in the free market. But here in Pickens County, our housing continuum looks different. If you're middle income, you're not buying your first home unless it's deed restricted. Even those upper incomes, 137,000, 165,000, up to 200% AMI, they're not owning homes. As we just saw, if the median home price is $3 million, you have to make $300,000 a year to afford that or more. So our housing continuum here in Pickens County means that most people are either got lucky or in deed restricted or subsidized housing or aren't owning homes. They're in free market rentals. So what we see there in the free market rentals, this is a graph of the green is the percent of listings that are $3,000 a month or more. So that's gone up to close to 60% since COVID. And then what I think is interesting is the percent of renters who can actually afford rentals has gone up as well. That's at about 20%. But that's a COVID trend that we've seen because more folks moved here with wages from elsewhere, continue to work remotely, earning really high wages, and can live in a free market rental in our valley, but aren't necessarily part of our local workforce. And so what we're seeing is only our highest income earners can afford free market rentals because that price is being driven up by demand. So where that kind of leaves us is no one working in Pickens County for a local brick and mortar industry or store can afford free market home ownership. And especially not our, our teachers, our vet techs, our emergency techs. And then only those high income earners can really afford free market rentals. So that leaves both our low and our middle income earners, which makes up more than 60% of Pickens County's workforce. They're dependent on deed restricted and subsidized housing if they want to live and work in Pickens County. So that's kind of where we get to what is our role of government is there's over 60% of our workforce who the free market is not for them. They are only here if they get subsidized, employer-based, deed restricted, you name it, some sort of help in housing, whether it be ownership or rental. So you've heard me talk before about the 3 C's of housing, the conserve, convert, construct. There's a lot of solutions, and we're doing a number of them. We can conserve the housing we have. We can keep people in the housing. We can let people age in place. We can convert a lot of this free market housing that's unattainable into affordable housing. That's like buy downs and rental assistance and things like that. And then we can, of course, construct new housing. A lot of these solutions, or almost all of them, they're not Picken County by ourselves doing this. These are all partnership based. So no matter what it is, we can come to the table, but we have to have other willing partners. And there's many in this community, which I think is one of the great things about the opportunities that we do have. And so when I do think about one of those C's, the construct element, this is a survey that was recently done by the West Mountain Regional Housing Coalition. They estimate that there's 2,100 units in the regional construction pipeline. So in the next 5 years, there's 2,100 units that are estimated to come online between Aspen and Glenwood Springs. 55% of those are going to be free market units. That is the wrong percentage based on what we just looked at.
Disgusting percentage.
So while we may all drive around the valley, bus around the valley, bike around the valley and say, wow, there's some construction, look at all these units coming up. More than half of those are likely free market, and they're not for local workforce. There are some, 45% of those are gonna serve our local workforce. But that's gonna be a small number compared to the need we just talked about. And many of those are not in Picken County.
And they'll be generating needs for more workers.
Right.
I think it is a little bit assumptive to say that they're not for the workforce, 55%. Just because they're a free market doesn't mean they're not for the workforce.
Right.
If you can afford them.
Well, we don't know what the prices are of them. We can assume they're going to be more expensive than people can, but it's not a fact that 55% are not for the workforce. Just trying to, be careful about what we put out there.
They are going to be harder to attain for our local workforce.
Better. Thank you.
So if the county wants to come to the table, participate in any of the 3 C's, it takes money. That's what it takes at the end of the day. What we have for housing funding right now is we have the housing impact fee. Between 2019 and 2023, we collected $9 million in impact fees. That's an average of $1.8 million a year. That's 1.75 of a house. That's not even 2 houses a year at current construction rates. But it's something. But one of the challenges with this is it's the elasticity of those collections makes it really hard to fund long-term projects. So for example, long-term bonds or like debt on a large construction project are usually 30 years. We can't use housing impact fee dollars to secure any sort of debt on a 30-year project because those fluctuate year to year. So we can't guarantee that as money that would pay down that debt service. The other funding that we have available is our general fund. But of course, our general fund has a lot of competing priorities. It funds many of the core services that we are responsible for delivering to the community. I find it interesting also that we have one of the lower mill levies, second lowest, actually.
Who's the other?
I don't know. That's a question for Ann. Who's the lowest?
I'll have it in a second.
Why, thank you.
Let's have what?
I thought it was
I'm gonna
Bent.
bet Baca.
Baca. I knew it started with a B. Yeah.
Baca County? That's Springfield, Colorado. That's where my son-in-law's from.
Oh, is that right?
Don't give him any ideas about moving home.
So in the 2023 and 2024, you all did dedicate $7 million of the general fund balance towards affordable housing. We've used that on acquisitions of new housing. We're saving a bit of it for an upcoming larger investment in the Phillips Mobile Home Park and affordable housing project. But that's what we have when we sit at the table or when we get asked to sit at partnership tables. If we really want to be meaningful partners, we can come to the table with some housing impact fees, but those aren't guaranteed year over year, and whatever is available in the general fund.
And land.
And land. Yeah, and that's what we've done in the past, where I think we've had a lot of success with Basalt Vista and other projects where Picken County has been responsible for land or horizontal infrastructure, and we've relied on partners for the vertical. But as far as real hard cash, those are your two options to address the solutions. I think I turn it over there to you, John, now.
So this has been an ongoing discussion, really since I got here in 2011 and way before that, I think. But more recently, I think with, as you saw in some of the charts that Ashley presented, the problem has become more acute, right? The affordability issues, particularly in the Roaring Fork Valley, have become more acute for our workforce. And so that's reflected in the citizen attitude survey, but it's also been reflected in this board's conversations about how we participate and how we act to address this problem. This year alone is a main focus of our retreat in February, and we've had 3 mini retreats since then in April, May, and June, and I will be happy to schedule more because there's unfinished business still. But we've really been wrestling with how do we participate in a more meaningful way in the community to address this issue. And what we keep running up against is exactly what Ashley was saying. We lack that consistent funding mechanism. We have a housing impact fee, and we've increased it significantly. Our collections are up this year, but we're feeling like we're going to have to refund some of that based on board direction. We also have some pending lawsuits as a result of those increases. And so there's elasticity for those issues that Ashley is referring to, but there's also elasticity just because it's very dependent on development cycles, which tend to go up and down. And so our ability to bond, our ability to make long-term commitments off of that dedicated revenue source to partner on projects is limited, right? It is a save as you go kind of plan. You build fund balance and then you spend it down, and it happens at different rates. Other than that, it's been rather ad hoc. If we have additional fund balance in the general fund, for example, that was unanticipated, more recently it's been dedicated for that, but it's been difficult for us to identify a stable funding source. And if you have if we ourselves are trying to put a project together that may rely on long-term financing, that's problematic. If we're trying to partner with another entity who's trying to put together a capital stack and financing stack for a project, that inability to make longer-term commitments makes us a less attractive partner in those types of projects. Through the discussions that we've had, the board recognizing that the second priority of the community was also growth management. So we had affordable housing as our number 1 priority and growth management as our number 2, was very careful in terms of how you set goals, in terms of being a meaningful partner to address the problem, but also not adding unnecessarily to any growth pressures or feelings of growth in the community. So the board set a goal of partnering in the development.
Whoa, what was that?
Hell was that?
Light bulb or something?
No, I think our TVs just went out.
No.
Oh, this one's still on.
Oh, I think that TV.
That one went out.
So are we still online?
It was.
It was just the speaker.
It was very poppy.
That could have just
Felt like
been
it was
the
right.
audio. Yeah, it did. It came out of our speakers when it cut off. That's what it
I
was.
would unplug your computers.
I guess we can just proceed with that TV and I'll head upstairs and ask Andrew if there's
Yeah, I heard, it sounds like we just had a power surge of some kind, so,
Sounded like a gunshot to me.
It was the
honestly.
speakers making a pop.
yeah.
Just saying.
Do we still have audio?
I think my heart is still beating, but
I'll go upstairs and ask Andrew. If there's
All
any-
right.
Great, thanks.
For public who
keep
might
going.
be listening, I'm sorry, we just had something
Surge.
unexpected happen, surge in our meeting room, and we've lost some of our electronics here.
It really sounded like it was
And-
right here. Did it sound like that for you, that it was right in front of you?
Okay. Well,
Well, hopefully we didn't lose our.
I don't see
TVs
anything that went
totally.
out except for that one thing.
Those two
Yeah.
TVs, but it almost sounded like hopefully we didn't lose the TVs.
well, we're still broadcasting on Grassroots,
Yeah,
right?
let's just keep
And we're
going.
still on Zoom. So, recognizing that the board wanted to strike a balance between being more aggressive in housing and also growth, the board set a goal of developing or acquiring 250 units over the next 10 years, as well as supporting and the prevention of homelessness and maintenance of existing housing stock. I think as the board is well aware, we do have an aging stock of affordable housing in the portfolio that Ashley talked about earlier. That's in need of some help there. In terms of partnering,
John,
yeah.
it looks like some people are trying, like the attendees, like Laura and Kelly are trying to talk. Can we hear them?
Can you hear us, Kelly? Nod if you can. I don't see her
I'm gonna
nodding.
have snacks.
Zoom is,
You can hear them, we can't.
I vote yes.
Our speakers, something's blown in our audio system
Alaska,
here.
Steve.
Well, it's been very rainy.
See you,
They
but I
had
don't
like
hear you.
a month's worth of rain since we got
Our
here,
speakers
over a couple of days.
Can we get a wave from
So,
somebody
uh,
online if
Cal
you can hear
Parsons
us
is
in the
like
room?
Okay.
8
I don't
feet
think that
tall.
was a wave.
Just the
I think that was a
executive
wave. That
was a
enormous
wave.
plants
Steve,
Wave
everywhere.
again, Steve.
Oh, wow.
Steve, can you hear us? Kelly, can you hear us?
What's the temperature during the
Oh,
day
there
over
we go.
there?
Nope, they're just talking to each
Well,
other.
I have my, wearing my
Kelly and Steve, I logged into the Grassroots feed and they can hear us. We just can't hear them.
Correct. You still can't hear us. Yep. So let's.
Yeah, that's.
why don't we take a 10-minute break? and
Great,
see
we're
if
gonna
we
break
can
for
dive
10
in?
minutes to
Francie,
sort
that's
this
why
out.
you heard.
You guys,
right
you
from
just
the
came
keys.
through. We can hear you now.
Oh, are we
Oh, you
back?
can hear us? Oh, yeah, there are the mics. They're working now.
Mics are back.
All right.
So,
Well done.
sorry,
Must
we
have been
had
Rich.
something rather dramatically pop, but now the TVs are back on. Do we have any idea what just happened?
About to go downstairs and take a look.
Something shorted out, yeah.
Well,
Okay.
There was a pop that came through the speakers.
Well, maybe it'll be an excuse to finally replace all this stuff. So do we need to start over from slide one, or
No,
we
let's just
okay
pick
to-
it up
okay.
right here.
I think we lost the last minute and a half, 2 minutes.
I think we
Couple
need to go
minutes.
to
I'm very
discussion.
Yeah, John, we can go, lost the last minute or two.
Okay. So in terms of our discussions today, we've talked mostly, though, about these funds being available to partner with other entities in order to help bring affordable housing projects over the finish line by contributing to capital stacks. And so we're not looking at funding 100% of these units. It's more of a percentage. Do you want to go to the next slide, Ashley? So with that, what we have proposed through the conversations we've had during these mini retreats is a mill levy of 1.5 mills to be dedicated to affordable housing. That would produce just over $8.5 million a year at today's assessed valuations. That's on a property that has a actual value of $1 million, a residential property of $1 million. That would increase somebody's property tax bill by about $121 a year, or 33 cents a day.
Per million dollars.
Per million. So if it were a $10 million market value home, that would be $1,200. right? And $3.30 a year, a day.
$330.
And then estimated tax on 1 million of actual commercial value would be about $435 a year, $1.19 a day
Per million.
per million, correct. Correct. And so on possible uses of the funds, the board recognizes that there's a continuum of need and impact that these funds could be used for. That can be for preserving and restoring current affordable housing, conversion of free market units, buy downs. That is very similar to what we do for our own employees in terms of our internal deed restriction program and the program that we've been funding now with the Housing Coalition regionally. Partnerships for development of new housing. And so we have talked to potential partners who have projects really on the books that they're trying to develop capital stacks for. Town of Snowmass Village, has 2 projects that they're looking to put capital stacks together for. City of Aspen has obviously a very active program. There are some nonprofit entities out there that are looking to put capital stacks together for affordable housing. These would all be opportunities for us to come in and help make those projects happen in order to meet the board's goal of 250 units over the 10 years. An area where there has not been consistent funding and where we've been really working are areas of transitional housing, supportive housing, emergency sheltering, and then also senior housing. And so we anticipate that the language that you'll be considering will be permissive for addressing all of these areas of housing need, with special emphasis being put on workforce housing. And in terms of workforce housing, the board has expressed a desire to set policy around really how do we make investments to ensure that our essential workers and our essential kind of community members are going to be served, and that will be on a project by project basis and on the investments and policy direction of the board. But really there's an emphasis on how do we ensure we have housing for our first responders, or our transit drivers, or our snowplow drivers, our healthcare workers, human services responders. If there's a child abuse case, how do we ensure that we have somebody close that can be responding? Our teachers and educators. All of these members of the community that are essential to our community functioning.
But this is just an example of some of them.
That's
This
correct.
is not definitive.
It's not, and it's not an exhaustive list, yeah. But what we have heard from the board is that as we're putting those partnerships together and such, we do want to have an emphasis on these types of partnerships. So it could be partnering with the school district on a capital stack for a project that they may have. It could be partnering with the hospital, those sorts of things.
What'd you find out?
Nothing so far. We'll just continue as normal and look into it after today.
In terms of prioritizing where affordable housing should be, we in working with our municipal partners and such, there will be an emphasis obviously within the urban growth boundaries, but we won't necessarily be limited to that. And so we do, though, have a process. We currently have land use policies, and we're going through a process right now as a result of the Vision Committee and Growth Committee, the Growth Committee work. for a Vision 2050 process that will provide the board with recommendations for land use policies concerning affordable housing and when and where and under what conditions it's acceptable to develop affordable housing outside of the urban growth boundary. It's a little bit different than our policies now. We're recommending that we stay consistent with those policies as they are from time to time amended by this board.
Staying consistent with policies that are changing.
Well,
It's called being
you're
flexible.
staying consistent with
Just want to make
With
sure
the
I understood what
policies.
you were saying.
Absolutely. The other thing that we've talked a lot about, and I'm going to hand this back over, I think, in a second here, is what mechanisms are available to us to thread these funding sources together and create capital stacks by encouraging philanthropic giving or encouraging private and public dollars to come together. And while still in the fact-finding phase, we're looking at a housing trust for the purpose of using these funds or threading these funds together. And Ashley, were you going to cover the housing
I
trust?
can just give a little more info. So when we think about if the board decides to put a ballot question on, and then if the voters would like us to continue with that and they say yes, we wouldn't put all of the money towards any one thing any given year. It would be agreed upon every year in an annualized budget process on how the money would be spent. Of course, some of it could be spent on projects that the county is leading, but also we recognize that partnerships are so key to this. Laura, do you want to jump in now or after the fact?
Keep going, Ashley. I'm happy to just tag on.
When the attorney raises the hand, I always get nervous that I should be quiet immediately. So one of the things that we have found could be a really interesting tool to introduce to our community toolbox is a 501c3 housing trust. This housing trust would be different than a generic 501c3 because it would have this specific charitable purpose of lessening the burden of government, which is a specific IRS designation that actually has a pretty high bar to meet that. But then we would actually get the benefit of being able to take out debt as a trust. So we would have to meet a high bar, but then this trust would be able to access debt to fund housing. It would also enable partnerships that we currently don't have a mechanism or a vehicle for enabling for larger capital projects. That includes bringing in potential philanthropic dollars and smaller partners who right now can't be part of a capital stack because there's such a high barrier to entry. So I think that there's a lot of possibility with what we could do with the housing trust. If the trust were to take out debt, it would need to be paired with a reliable funding stream, such as a property tax. Because let's say that the trust gets set up, it funds let's say a 30-unit development. The debt on that development is not going to be able to be serviced with just monthly rent or the sale of those units. The numbers here in Pickens County unfortunately don't work out, that whatever we can collect for rent actually pays off the cost of a project. So that's why we would need an additional sustainable funding source, such as a property tax, to support any activities of the trust. And if the board decided to go forward with this, the trust could support new construction, but also land acquisition, remodels, and it could support for both workforce as well as transitional housing, emergency support housing, more of those things on that housing continuum. So it's not limited, as some of our other housing funds would be, to specifically workforce. It has a broader definition of how it could be used. There are a ton of options for how we could set up the board and exactly what the trust could do. So that's the caveat there, is staff is very much still in the fact-finding phase, but at this point we do think that this would be a viable option for channeling some of the collected funds towards really having a much higher impact with those funds by bringing in real meaningful partnerships, including donations and philanthropic dollars, and even really low interest loans, high quality loans that maybe we can't get otherwise. Laura, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, no, just tagging on what Ashley said, a housing trust really represents another tool that this board can leverage in its efforts. But for that to be created and reliant on county sort of resources requires a funding source. So, it is a nonprofit entity. Other folks in the community could go out and create one to do this sort of work. But to really be able to meet the IRS requirements to show that it lessens the burden of government, requires it being a function of government. This board has clearly indicated that affordable housing, workforce housing, attaining housing for this community is a function of government that you guys are doing. But you also need to show that it lessens the burden of government. So you need to bring other people to the table. And that's what this board has previously indicated you want to do on housing anyway. It really is another tool for you guys to leverage community resources and community knowledge, right? We have a lot of folks who are really talented here, and working with them presents some new and exciting routes forward.
Thanks, Laura. And for community members listening, if there are still any out there, you may think, oh my goodness, a housing trust, another 501c3 working in housing. What's going on? We have so many already. And I have shared this with the board, but I'll share it publicly. Recently, I've had over 10 interviews with different communities that are very similar to Picken County around housing. Every single one of them has a housing authority and at least two, has a community land trust and some sort of 501c3 housing organization in their toolbox, if not more organizations in addition. And so while I think we've been at housing for a long time, we are very familiar with building housing and deed restricting it and then managing those deed restrictions. The new kind of toolbox, for lack of a better term, for these communities that I'm seeing who are really innovating is to have a lot of different entities, a lot of different tools, so that we can apply different models to our different needs. And so I know that this would be a change of pace for our community, and it may seem like, oh, why would we have another organization? But I'm here back from interviews and lessons learned from other places saying this seems to be the new way of moving forward with housing, is to have more partnerships and not less.
Okay.
I have a question for Laura, probably.
We're done.
Regarding lessening the burden of government, what is the bar that we need to, attain in order to meet that criteria? Do we absolutely need philanthropic donations of a certain percentage, or do we need some other source of income in addition to what we're putting in? How is that?
Yeah. Well, here's your fun lawyer answer. It depends. The IRS will conduct what's called a facts and circumstance test, and that really takes a look at, how are you able to show that it really has lessened the burden of government? Now, that could be a variety of things. Maybe you're able to get funding or loans at a different rate through that organization than we might get as a county entity. Maybe you have people that are participatory on that board that have significant knowledge that allow you to not have to pay for that knowledge. It really can be very, very fact specific, and there is no one clear route. You can really leverage what is available in your community to demonstrate this.
Got it. Thank you. So it sounds doable.
Yes.
Was that back to me?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, go ahead and, so one of the challenges, the county is gonna have, 2 ballot questions. We have a without increasing taxes, a debt question for our enterprise fund at the landfill for expansion of the landfill. And that will be based totally on fees. And then this. We do need to notify our clerk and recorder. So of our intent to have questions on the ballot. That would come at our July 24th regular meeting. July 26th is the last day to notify the clerk of our intent to participate in the election.
July 26th?
July 26th is our last day. July 24th is our last regular meeting before that time.
So to have something on the ballot, any entity must inform the elections office by July 26th?
I believe that if an item is being petitioned on, it's a slightly different timeline, if I recall
I
right.
thought we had more time than they
Me
did
too.
than less.
I thought it was like September 6th or something.
Well, so let me just roll through this and I'll let Rye correct the record here. So July 26th, last day to notify the clerk of our intent to participate in the election. August 14th would be a second reading of a resolution to approve ballot language. August 27th is the final ballot language due date for the clerk. I believe there were
makes
some
sense.
different timelines if questions were coming to the board through petition. Is that
Yes.
correct? Then sorry.
No,
Ryan,
yeah,
I suppose.
generally,
Do you want to see the timeline?
yeah, so you need to fix the ballot measure through a formal resolution. And you need 2 meetings to do that. The September 6th deadline that you are referring to, Francie, is the date that the clerk and recorder's office has to have the ballot certified by the state. So that's the deadline that all of the clerk and recorders backdating from. The August 27th date, believe is I'm sorry. Sorry, that's not July 27th. Yeah, August 27th is likely. That is a date that Ingrid and I discussed based on what they need to do with their internal programming to create the ballot before they send it down to the state for review.
So that's the whole ballot language.
That's the everything. They have to have the form all ready to go, programmed into whatever software they use by that day so that they can send it to the state to be approved.
And so I think our main point today is, for the purposes of this question, we will need direction from the board pretty clearly on ballot language to bring forward. But we also, let me walk that back. We will need direction from the board as to whether it is the board's intent to put a ballot question for housing on the ballot so that we can notify the clerk. And then in July, we'll be working through finalizing the language. We do have proposed ballot language to put in front of you today.
Okay.
Can I jump in?
Please, go
That's
ahead.
also in our packet, very.
Thanks. So I just want to understand, so because our second meeting of the month in August is on the 28th, and we need a 2-read process, that this has to start at the end of July, is that correct?
So that may be correct, Kelly. The date that, Laura's maybe gonna weigh in, but speaking with.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. You guys could do it through special meetings or other ways. Staff proposed this to not create a special meeting sort of time frame.
I just would know, this does not really totally line up with what the published election calendars are. So I just would really ask, if we think we need more time, I don't know if the board thinks we need more time, but this feels like a week early to me. I think the deadline is September 6th, but I don't know if we need the time, but it would be helpful to understand if we do need the time, if we have it or not.
So Kelly, the deadline is September 6th. Ingrid and I have been working off the assumption that this board could approve a formal resolution during the 2 meetings in August, if you had to, and still have time to put a ballot measure onto the fall ballot. I'm happy to confirm that with Ingrid, but that's been an ongoing discussion I've had with her, whether this August 27th date sounds like it's more trying to get it out with enough time for Ingrid to work with that. But I believe if this board approves something on August 28th, there's still time to get it on the ballot. I'm more than happy to walk next door and talk to Ingrid right now and confirm that for you all. But that is the date that I've been working on for a couple other potential ballot issues that have been floating around.
Yeah, I have a question about that. So if we, by July 26th, indicate to the elections office that we are going to participate in the election, do we have to be specific about what the topic of that participation is, or the number?
Or the language.
Or the language, or do we have
Number
to
of
say, we're
ballot
going to
items or
participate in the
questions?
election about this or about that? Can we just say, yes, we're going to participate in the election, but not specify how many ballot issues there might be or what they might be about?
Laura's got input
Laura, go
on
ahead.
that.
Yeah, I have spoken with Ingrid about this. The desire is for the clerk's office to be able to plan through the resources, how big the ballot looks, how many pages, all of those sorts of things. So any question that goes on the ballot is presumed to be 250 words or less, although there is some ability to work with the clerk on that. So the idea is really to communicate with the individual who's running this election so that they can properly plan and have the resources. I've indicated to Ingrid, we plan to let her know if we are going to participate in the election and probably how many questions that looks like. She's considering this a conversation that's ongoing. You guys do at some point have to decide if you're going to participate or not. And deciding to participate doesn't preclude you from changing language, looking at alternative things, but there are deadlines that are approaching very rapidly.
But it's a request from the elections office, it's not law. So if you came in on the 30th, because you didn't have your mind made up before the 26th, you could still legally be included on the ballot?
So we're starting to move into an area that's
Can you
less
speak up just a little bit,
defined.
Laura?
Yeah, we're starting to move into an area that's slightly less defined. The clerk executes an IGA with governmental entities. Historically, the clerk has not executed an IGA with Pitkin County. I can tell you that IGA is what the clerk's office has worked through with Pitkin County before. The date on that IGA to notify is July 26th. I need to double check, but that may also be the statute.
Having a problem that might keep it off the ballot.
That's a brand new date to me. And
Okay, thank you. So we've got the date. Steve, go ahead.
I had my hand up.
Oh, sorry. Patty was first, Steve. Do you?
Let Steve go
You
first,
go.
because he's.
No, now he said you have to go. Steve, you have to
I'll go, because, okay, yes, we do have a date. We need to let the clerk know that we have the intent to put a ballot question on. As to the details, I don't know how fine-tuned we have to be. But my question is, if we're going to do a landfill one, what's the status of that ballot question? Because we're going to need to be approving that on the same kind of time frame. Letting the clerk know we have the intent, or we're intending to put a question on what that language is, and certifying that language with this board with a 2-read resolution to move it forward, correct?
We're working on that on the same timeline.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I just want to make sure we got everything going.
Yep.
I have a third one. I think the board needs to discuss at some point. I'm hoping I can get it on the agenda for next Tuesday, maybe executive session, to talk about an airport ballot question
exactly, that's why I'm asking these questions.
coming from us. And I think we need to rule that in or out, and we need to do it in a timely manner if we want to follow these deadlines before us.
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Patty. Yeah, this is going to be a very full ballot. We know that. Steve, go ahead.
So in terms of the
Turn-
question,
Hey, Steve, turn off your
favor
camera.
Oh, geez, I love technology,
frozen.
guys.
I would favor having the earlier dates. The language that I've seen is, I like the language the way it's written. I don't see, might need to be tweaked a little bit, but I think we could have on July 24th pass the first reading of the ballot language and then do final one on August 14th. So we are in plenty of time to give it to Ingrid with the final language, and in case there's any snafus, we still then have a couple weeks of leeway to catch up on that. But I would rather do it sooner than later and not take a chance of missing out entirely.
Thanks, Steve. I was just going to say, you may need to turn off your camera because you're breaking up and kind of the cache. Thank you. That might help. I don't know if it will. And Laura, you were doing that as well.
That was last week's meeting.
So you might want to turn off your camera.
Yeah, and I might suggest that I think we understand the questions around the calendar, so we can bring that back. I think it'd be good to get some feedback from the board on the ballot language and direction to bring it forward.
Patty.
I agree with, I'm comfortable with the ballot language as written. I did have concerns about the housing trust, but I think that can come in our, if we move forward with the question, that can come in our information we provide to the public as to how we're going to administer this fund. I think there's some issues, concerns as to trust in the community, and so I think this housing trust will reinstore that trust.
Laura, do you want to cover this slide and then talk about the language?
Yeah, I think this one is Anne. I don't want to preempt her.
Good afternoon. Sitting before you as the Chief Financial Administrative Officer now. Just wanted to confirm how the funds will be, funneled, I guess, into Pitkin County and on. But it would be a property tax that will be collected by the treasurer, and it would be deposited in a new special revenue fund within Pitkin County's chart of accounts. And the uses of the funds would be determined by the Board of County Commissioners through their annual budget process, or, of course, during any mid-year budget supplementals if that's what you decided. But I just wanted to confirm that the funds will be coming into Pitkin County, and then you decide where they go after that. They wouldn't be funneled to any other organization or housing trust or such entity.
Can I ask a question? So when you say determined by the BoCC, the use of the funds and that they won't go to any other housing, how tight and how limited are the guardrails on this fund? Could we appropriate some of these funds to put into something slightly unrelated? It has to be housing?
Relates to the ballot language and how the ballot language is written.
Okay, specifically to the ballot language, which is still pretty broad.
Correct. And then you could restrict it further by using a resolution to form the fund, defining this, more specific uses of the funds. But of course, that wouldn't be, that could be changed by either yourselves or your predecessors at any point in time.
So if Pitkin County takes in this tax money, then can it transfer it to the housing fund?
So you would have to appropriate the funds, and then you can make those appropriations
To the housing
to
fund?
the house, yeah, to the housing trust.
I meant trust. I meant to say
Related to
trust.
a specific project. You'll have to
Oh, it
make
has to be
those.
related to a specific project to put it in the housing trust?
Well, typically you'd want it dedicated to a particular project. You can fund the housing trust, I believe, Laura, in any way. You'll have some flexibility. You'll just have to assure that it's used for the purposes that are authorized in the ballot. And that's why it's usually safer to have it dedicated. I think Laura was trying to jump in, but I can't tell if her internet is.
I was gonna say pretty much that sentence.
Oh, good. I'm glad we're on the same
I have
page.
a question
Thanks, Laura.
on that. John, you used the word, the board can decide to give it to the housing trust. So what's our other option?
any investment into affordable housing that is consistent with the ballot language that you're about to see. So the uses that are identified in the ballot
So the
language.
housing, or the housing trust is just one mechanism.
It's
that we
just
can
one
employ
mechanism.
Out of several.
But, I'm going to use Francie's proverbial but, to create a housing trust, it's my understanding you have to have a dedicated funding mechanism to fund a housing trust. So we'd have to be careful on not putting enough money into that trust, because if the feds are going to be going through this with a fine-tooth comb, we want to make sure we're in compliance in order to create that trust.
So two issues.
Is that right, Ann? I'm looking at Ann.
No.
Yeah, two issues there. The first is, so if the trust is issuing debt, then there needs to be a consistent funding source available
I
for
think
the
there
debt
might
to
need to be
be
one to create
issued.
it. That's a
And then-
clarification I need.
And then to create it would be the filing with the IRS demonstrating that threading together of different funding sources. So that would be
Dedicated
both
funding sources.
private and,
Yeah, I think that, I learned that in NACO with their housing information they passed out.
on to
So, I
the
mean, I think
ballot
this-
language. Oh,
Okay,
sorry.
I was just going to add that, you know, the structuring of projects within the housing trust or any other way would yet to be determined and depends upon the project. So, you know, you might want to buy down the infrastructure, the horizontal piece of it, or
Right.
land, and then let the rents pay the debt service. There's a number of different ways of doing it.
Right.
All I'm saying is it's coming into Pitkin County, and then we would decide how we use those funds.
Got
Well, I'm
it. Thanks,
comfortable with the
Ann.
language and moving it forward to a formal process. And Rye just went over to talk with Ingrid to see if he could clarify some dates, but, and then the other two ballot questions, I think we need to find out the status of the landfill ballot question, make sure we're on track with that, and then a discussion about the possibility of an airport question.
Kelly has a question.
Thanks. Yeah, we had some discussion at our last meeting on this about including some language relative to being consistent with the comprehensive plan. And I just, I think that could be a meaningful addition, but I'm sure you guys have talked about it. So I'm wondering what staff's reaction to that component of our conversation is.
You talking the land use plan?
I see Laura's hands up too.
Yeah, let's walk through the ballot language. It's exciting. You guys are excited and you're diving in before I even introduce it. So you have seen a version of this language before. I wanted to identify the changes that occurred between what you're looking at here today and what you last looked at. So we had a discussion at our last mini retreat that really surrounded a few different items, and there was at least some consensus around changes in two areas. And one of those was the question as originally drafted was a permanent voter approved revenue change. As you can see here, this is a 40-year mill levy. The board, I think, was trying to be extremely sensitive to concerns about additional tax at this time, and then weighing that with the need to provide this affordable housing funding mechanism. So walking back from a permanent voter approved revenue change to a time limited mill. So that's the first change that you'll
Excuse
see
me,
in
Laura.
here.
Laura, hold on just a sec. I did have a question about that because I remembered talking about a 30-year term, which would line up with a bond or a financing issue. So how did it get to 40?
So that may
Yeah.
have, oh, go ahead, Laura, sorry.
Yeah, my notes showed that we talked about 30 and 40, but there was direction towards 40 because you will not be able to get this money in the door immediately on January 1st, issue a bond for 30 years. It's just not realistic. So there was a time frame to allow for some of the things like a robust creation of the housing trust, identify identification of actual projects that this can be put towards, and that's where the 40-year number came from.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think 40 years does much to mitigate people's concerns about how long this tax
Probably,
is going to be
that
around.
sounds like a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
But we can't bond without having
I
a
know.
dedicated
I have a lot of questions also we'll get to, but let's get through the ballot language unless somebody has another question on this issue. Go ahead, Laura.
Okay, and then the second change that was made from the last time you guys saw this is in the first bullet point, which starts with increasing the supply of affordable housing. And this language really talks through partnerships with the types of entities that you guys are desiring to work with. And there was a desire to add local businesses and housing trusts into that language, and that has been done. Those are the two changes that there was at least a sense of consensus on. There was certainly other discussion, and I'm hopeful you guys will have discussion here today about what Kelly has raised, regarding community character and how to ensure that that remains consistent while you guys do additional housing work. Additionally, do you want to talk about the housing spectrum as is laid out in bullet point number 2, a discussion from everything from senior housing, transitional housing, supportive housing, and services that support housing stability. So if you guys have some consensus around those, then language will be brought forward. Kara is also, I think, there in the room. I think I spied her hiding between Anne and Ashley. I don't know if she's still there,
Yep,
but
she
she
is.
is prepared to talk about the land use code and the processes that you are ongoing with. And we can work on if there is some desire to incorporate some language regarding those things about what that looks like the next time, if you move this question forward to a first read, what that question form is when it comes back to you.
So you're going to talk about the growth committee.
I'm here to answer questions.
If I could just take a step back, I think that was one of the reasons when we had that slide on prioritizing where affordable housing should be. Maybe Ashley, you can go back to that. What we were recommending is that the board actually adopt a policy to be consistent. I think one of our concerns is that language around a comprehensive plan versus land use policies and such, and how those are going to be effectuated in the future. And so you either need to have the language be broad, or our recommendation was for the board to adopt a policy for use of the housing funds to be consistent. And then, Carrie, you can talk a little bit maybe about our next steps in terms of the growth committee and Vision 2050.
Sure, and just as a reminder, you already have the citizen housing policy that actually does give you a lot of flexibility, but is consistent with kind of the goals and the vision of the county over the years. So that is where we landed on the land use policy, rather than, Kelly, to your point, to the comprehensive plan as just the timing moving up. The current comprehensive plan, since it's really from 2003, is probably not what you all are looking to reflect back to. So that is where the mechanism that we are identifying is the land use policies as amended from time to time. Really what that points to, Greg, as you were calling out, is as follow-up from the growth committee, we will be looking at that current land use policy and further refining it from those growth recommendations. And as the land use policy that is adopted by the board versus a comp plan is only adopted by P&Z and is an advisory document. So this puts that back into the board policy.
Great. Thanks, Kara. Stick around. Kelly, do you still have your hand up?
Yes, but then I'm thinking more about what Kara just said. I will clarify, I wasn't thinking about like this language intending to tie us to the comprehensive plan in effect in November 2024 for in perpetuity. I was thinking about it more of tying it to what is in effect at any time that we're collecting taxes on this. in this fund. Do you see that distinction?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I do.
I continue to think it's meaningful to commit us and future boards that this tax won't be used to jeopardize rural character or operate outside of our land use policies. Because those land use policies go through quite extensive public process to tell us where we should be building affordable housing. So I continue to be motivated to figuring out a way to incorporate that.
Thanks. Thanks, Kelly. I share your concern about that because it sounds to me like things could go, we could have unintended consequences that we can't even imagine. And I want to go to Patty.
Yeah, I have 2 points. One is, where does our policy, I'm not sure what we're calling it these days, about affordable housing within the urban growth boundary, where does that stand? What document, what?
It is, I wish Ray was here because we pulled it up verbatim. It is in Chapter 1 of Title 8 of the Land Use Code. That is where all your land use policies are. I don't have the number right in front of me, but that is the citizen housing policy. And just for reference, I don't believe that has been changed
Since Mick Ireland and I adopted it.
Yeah. And so as working with community development, as we're looking through any kind of revisions to the comp plans, just so you all know kind of process, what we're talking about is we would see a comp plan adopted by the P&Z, and then there might be some policies in there that would come forth to the board to review and make those, and so it would be revised in those areas.
I want to make sure we have that clear, that that policy is in the process of being readdressed, because we don't want to confine our use of our location of housing within the urban growth boundary, because we're not going to get voter support for all of the housing to be up here when they might need some specialized housing in the hitherlands of our county over there.
Hinterlands.
Yeah, but the other question I have too is, I think we should have a draft version of this come back to us with some language in about Kelly's concerns and Greg's, and I agree, as to how we're going to address site location, et cetera. And then, so allow us to look at the existing one we have in front of us with one that has some kind of language in it. Because we also have to be careful, we don't want a ballot question that's, 4 pages long.
And I think maybe a check-in, because I'm hearing two different. So one, as proposed, is what was before you is we left to get put in guardrails, but let it remain flexible and adaptable, but still a robust process for any changes.
Right.
Versus I think the other is a little bit kind of what are the details today that are held in the ballot language in perpetuity. I'm hearing two different pieces.
Well, I just think we need some language in there about character of the valley and land use, as those land use policies and plans change over the future. I'd like to just see some language before I can say yes or no to it, because I don't know how it's going to look. I'm okay with the way it's written right now, but if the new language comes forward that resolves some issues the board might have, then we need to have that discussion.
I can say I'm okay with it as it's written right now, but yeah, the concern is what we're going to raise the money for these purposes, but we don't know. Once again, we don't know where it's going to be or exactly what it's going to be, but we're asking for the money. And so my biggest concern is that I'm pretty confident we'll spend the money well on the right places for the housing that's really needed. I'm confident, and that question of mine has been answered in the last couple of years, so I'm grateful for that. I am concerned, though, that we don't know where it's going to go, and it's going to be difficult, and I do want to see guardrails on that. I don't quite know how to construct them, but say a future board decides that open space isn't important anymore, and they could build anywhere, that could change things dramatically. And I'd like to be able to have some sort of strong indication so any voter knows what they're actually voting for and where it's going to go within reason. And you'll have to help me figure out what that is. Francie, then Kelly.
Did you want an answer back first, though?
Only if you've got one.
Laura appears to have one.
Laura?
No, I don't have an answer. I mean, you guys can put restrictive language in here. My advice is not to do that. I can tell you that you don't know the projects that will be presented to you. You don't know the extent of the problem that will exist in, 10 years, 20 years. And you need to leave yourselves the opportunity and the space to do that work. Now, the board can also consider any sort of restrictive language in a resolution. You can consider restrictive language in your land use code. You have many mechanisms you can pull on to make sure that how this money is spent reflects what the community has told you its expectations of you are and how you want to meet those expectations.
Thanks, Laura. That helps, and I'll be looking for restrictive language in that regard.
Okay, shall I go?
Thank you, Francie.
Yeah, I'm concerned that this doesn't have any explanation of how much this is going to cost a property owner. So is there any way that's going to show up on the ballot? Because for most people, 1.5 mil doesn't mean anything. And it just looks to them like an increase in taxes. And so if they saw that it's $143, whatever it is,
21.
per $1 million worth of value, I think that would help people say, oh, that's all? I hope that's what they would say. So is there any way we can get that explanation of the actual breakdown onto the ballot, or would it just be in the blue book, or just in the blue book?
Yeah, it would not be in the ballot language, but there is the ability to significantly message that information in a coordinated campaign. You guys also have the ability to take a position on any sort of ballot language that is moved forward and is put on before your citizens, and you can discuss that exact information
With whoever is listening to us, compared to everybody who reads the ballot. I mean.
100%. Although I got to tell you, the vast majority of folks are going to look at not the entirety of the ballot language. There's been significant work that shows the short title, which is not even proposed here, will be the primary thing that folks tend to look at. So, a pithy direct communication, a tax increase, a mill levy for affordable housing. That tends to be, when you're looking at the actual ballot, how people distill down the question that is before them. You also have the ability to do a great deal of direct communication, and I think staff has put together some very solid numbers for you, so you'll be able to do that communication on what this looks like for an individual, what this looks like for a family.
Well, couldn't we have a parenthetical thing there that says on taxable real and personal property, and then in parentheses say approximately $143 per $1 million worth of value?
Yeah, that is something we can run by bond counsel. I have already run this question by bond counsel, just given the limited time frame that's left. There are a few changes to form that have been suggested. I anticipate bond counsel would strongly discourage that, but I cannot guarantee it.
Great.
And one of the reasons for that is that number is going to change over time. That's a point in time. Yeah.
Thanks, John. Thanks for that, Laura. Kelly, you've got your hand up.
Thanks. And just on this point, we are required to publish the financial information as part of the Tabor notice.
The blue book.
Yeah, we like our local blue book, right? So for local things, you also get sent a booklet with all the local tax measures, and it does spell out those type of implications in it, and every voter will get that mailed to them prior, in mid-September or late September. Yeah, so I'll say that, and then whenever we're ready to pivot, I would like to dig in a little bit on the second bullet point here, and just explain, like, I'm always looking for sort of the, like, what can we cut out, you know, like what is essential here? What should we absolutely keep? And if there's more than we need to keep, can we get rid of it? And so I guess I'd like some understanding of, all of the things past where it says, you know, cost of development, blah, 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 and construction of housing. Why are we keeping all the rest of that? What's essential and what is descriptive?
I'm happy to jump in here if that's an appropriate time. Yeah, so this really is descriptive. Housing is written broadly enough that these things would be included within it. There has been a desire by the board to really identify what you guys are going to spend this money on, and this is an attempt to do so. You can keep it without those additional sort of language regarding senior housing, transitional housing, supportive housing. I would recommend that you keep services that support housing stability, because it is slightly different than the first part of that, that term in terms of development, acquisition, construction, renovation. It is of a different nature than that first half of the question. This is really the ability for the board to communicate what you intend to spend these funds on. Do you intend to spend them on that entirety of the housing continuum? Or do you really want to do you could do something as tight as we're looking at home ownership. It really is a mechanism for you to communicate how you want to see this money leveraged for our community. Those are the types of things, senior housing, transitional housing, that this board has had substantial conversations with Health and Human Services about. And the recommendation was to include them so that the community knows this is what you're trying to solve. But it really comes back to how do you want to communicate your intent to do this type of work.
Thanks, Laura. Kelly, I like your point, and I was going to suggest if anybody thinks it would work, to me, renovation and maintenance actually could fall under preservation. I know they all have slightly different connotations, but if we're talking about preserving something, that could include renovation and maintenance. So we could eliminate those two words if that helps.
I agree. I like that.
Yeah, but then maybe in the third one, I would like to add something related to, like, capital reserves or something along those lines, because I think it's such a identifiable phrase in the community.
So you'd add capital reserves to attainment programs, deed restrictions, and down payment assistance?
Yeah.
Sure, I think I don't see a problem with that. And if we've got Ryan and Laura here and Kara and
yeah, you guys can't see me because of the connection, but I am taking notes on that. So you can't physically see me writing that down, but I am.
So are we agreeing to remove renovation and maintenance and add capital, whatever Kelly
Reserves.
said? Reserves.
I think capital reserves are a mechanism for preservation and don't need to be explicitly stated. I understand you're wanting people to get used to that expression, but I'm not sure this is the place to introduce it.
Well, the thing is, we've had a history where there were no capital reserves on affordable housing, and people got into trouble and still are. And so that these funds could be used to actually help create and maintain a capital reserve program makes sense in that regard to me.
I guess the difference is, like, bullet point 2 is what we would do, and bullet point 3 is how we would do it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Kelly, you have noticed perhaps that bullet point 1 is who you would do it with. So that is why those are structured in that particular way.
Okay. Other comments, questions? Hand up.
Whenever the board's ready, I'd like to just clarify some timing issues for you.
That would be great.
Okay. If we can move on to the time, we'll get back to timing.
But then you
here.
can come back to this.
Are we
I gotta
okay
go
with
run
the-
and jump
yeah.
into a hearing officer hearing too. So, but I just talked to Ingrid a little bit.
Go ahead, spill
So-
it, and you can go.
Yeah, as far as notifying the clerk of the intent to participate in the election, the clerk's already aware that you all intend to participate in the election. So you're certainly welcome to send that again, but I believe they already have that from you all.
Specifically on affordable housing or on
Oh,
anything?
they have it on a number of, it's just a general statement.
Okay,
Usually
great.
a lot of these dates are applicable to special districts, and I think Laura mentioned that. So the MOU she's working off, Ingrid provided that to Laura, and that's where some of these dates come from. So the operable date we're working off is September 6th. And that is the date that Ingrid has to send the certified language to the state. The last date that Ingrid has provided me that you all or anybody can have a ballot measure included in that transmittal to the state is August 30.
30.
What that means is that the BoCC can approve a formal resolution on August 28th if you would like. The word I got from Ingrid was it better be pretty darn right at that point.
Right.
So-
She needs a couple days at least.
She
Three,
needs a couple
ideally
days
three.
at least, but August 30 is the last date that she
she-
can take that.
Okay.
Now, there's all sorts of other dates and deadlines, and Laura is working on this, so that's great with regard to what's required under Tabor and all that kind of stuff with regard to notice and all that, so I won't jump in on that. But for this point of this discussion, July 26th is not something I guess the board needs to worry about, although, as Laura alluded to, you are working with Ingrid to try and coordinate this. So the sooner you get her any of this stuff, or her office any of this stuff, the better.
But an
Well-
outside citizens group has to have theirs in by the 26th.
The 26th date is the date for a special district to provide Ingrid's office with a notice of intent to participate,
What's the special district?
like one of your local special taxing districts,
School
like the
district,
school
ambulance
district.
district.
Or, yeah, exactly.
But what about citizen groups?
A citizen group does not have to file a notice of intent to participate in the election beyond, if they're going through a petition process, they do need to file a notice of intent, and that likely should have happened at this point, given
But
the
if they're
timeframe they're
bypassing
doing
the
it.
petition process in the
They're-
hopes that we'll fix it.
Needs to have enough time for you all to approve and fix the ballot measure, which would, at the last drop dead date, is to have those two readings happen in August.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thanks for clarifying that, I really appreciate it.
Yep.
Okay. So where do you want to go from
All
here?
good on timeline, so
Thank you.
Laura heard some edits to the ballot language as it's shown on screen. John, Laura, what do you see as next steps?
So I think we're taking this as direction then to edit this language and bring it back for board approval to place on the ballot, and that we would move forward with notifying the clerk of the county's intent to place this
Further
question
notification.
on the ballot. Am I hearing that correctly from the board, I think?
I think you are. I think you've got thumbs up from everybody.
And
Is
I
that-
would like to see when it comes back, the revised, along with the one we have before, so I can see them side by
Like
side.
a red line or revi?
No,
would you
no,
like?
however you want to do it, I can read.
Kelly
page
and
to page
Steve,
after
are you
get it.
okay? Thumbs up? Kelly's got a thumbs up. Steve, I can't see you, or you're there. Thumbs up from Steve. Okay, so I think we've got
Thank you, guys.
a consensus on that. I do have questions. I do have some questions I want to go through. After we've approved this, you're free to move to your next step, right?
But I think Ann has.
What was your next question for us? I wanted to go through some questions because some of the things have been brought up today. I wanted to just gain some clarity on.
I just wanted to update you on the landfill question, if that's an
Oh, and there's
appropriate
a
time to
landfill
do
question.
so.
Yep.
So we have the question already prepared and the resolution. The AIS, as soon as this meeting's finished, I'm going to upload it into Civic Clerk so you can see it. It's been run by Bond Council. In fact, they wrote it. And it'll be before you for first reading on July 24th. Second reading on August 14th.
And so we'll have a chance to look at that then. Great,
Correct.
thank you. Okay. Okay, questions. And these are general questions. We talked about the impact fees that we have. We have impact fees for affordable housing. There are people protesting, I guess, or we've been sued on the legality of some of these fees. I don't know the status of those. That's not what it's about. But the question is there any way we can increase those fees on the users that create the most number of additional employees? Are there mechanisms that we haven't used yet regarding increasing impact fees for the people making the impacts?
So, Greg, an impact fee has to have a rational nexus to the impact, and it's based on a study that establishes the nexus between a certain type of development activity and the impact. And so we've generally contracted that study out through the attorney's office. And we have come back with studies that have shown the impacts primarily on residential development. We don't have a large amount of commercial development, so there are different tools, I think, used by municipalities. This board did make the decision to go to 100% of that last impact fee study. One of the challenges is a lot of our activity has to do with remodels and those sorts of things. It can be more difficult to establish a rational nexus between an increased need for affordable housing on remodeled space than new square footage. And so that's one of the areas I think we'll get more clarity on as we go through some of our litigation process right now. But right now we are collecting 100% of what our most recent study showed. Okay, I do think that there are different places that we could look. However, an impact fee will always have that elasticity factor that we talked about versus a property tax. And so, so it makes it more difficult to finance against.
Well, and it's my understanding, John, correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't Jane in the attorney's office bring us back annually a review of the impact fees based on CPI and something else or something?
Yeah, so that was a formula that was established in the study so that we'd have a means of escalating the impact fee based on, cost of construction and those sorts of things. But it's not reevaluating the FTE impact that
Right.
maybe.
No, I know that's it, but so there's two things. The other thing is my understanding that some of the basis, and I'm not the lawyers, of the lawsuits is because we went to 100% and we did kind of a remodel kind of a thing, and what you didn't pay for in the past, you're now paying for now.
Right. So if that square footage had not incurred an impact fee in the past,
You're
it's
100%
still
having to pay it now.
right. So, but. Greg, I think there has been discussion about can you include remodels and those sorts of things. It's been more difficult to establish that defensible rational nexus.
A good question.
Thank you for that.
Laura's got her hand
Laura,
up.
go ahead.
She probably has a better answer
Didn't see
than
your
me.
hand.
No, that's okay. I think what you are seeing is that the impact fees that the county is charging really reflect a more whole assessment of the actual impact, and you are seeing some pushback on that, and that's a policy decision that the board made, and I would advise you not to move too much into a discussion on that given the pending litigation. You can have those discussions in the context of housing impact fees and how you calculate that moving forward. but it is fair to say, you know, there does need to be a substantial basis, and the way that that is most effectively done has been through those studies that really demonstrate exactly what that impact is.
Great, thanks, Laura. I wanted to reiterate something that I think Ann may have said, or maybe Ashley did. What the county brings to the table, what this will allow us to do is actually bring money to the table, which is something that's often essential with partners. Other things we can offer are perhaps a process, a streamlined permitting process down the road. I know we've talked about that. I'm not sure what's even possible there. We could offer land if we own it. We could offer help with horizontal infrastructure. And I just wanted to ask, are we pursuing those avenues as rigorously as we are this tax? Only because I think they would be very helpful, and it might make our money go a lot farther. That's another one of my questions. And we do know that our partners in the community are stepping up, and we're counting on that happening in doing this, because this money alone is not going to build a lot of housing, but it allows us to participate, and I know it allows us to do some financing. And I'm not sure how much we can finance from that amount of money. Somebody could share that. I just think it's really helpful to have all this. Other questions I wanted to throw out are,
Can I just comment on what you just said?
Yeah, please do.
I mean, I also think and hope that it also allows us to bring the values of our organization to the table in a partnership project in a way that might be more meaningful, and I think about how, your references in particular, but all of our efforts on trying to bring in core whenever we can and try and figure out how we can best do, projects that solve climate, are contributing to climate solutions, how we protect rural character. I think that those are more intangible things that I think matter when we're at a table about how a project could best look.
Great, thank you for that. Thanks for that. That's an excellent point. Moving right along, we talked about the number of affordable housing units in APSHA, and we've got a vague idea of what other affordable housing units are out there. How good an idea do we actually have of the number of affordable housing units in the community, whether they're owned by businesses or other entities not associated with APSHA? That's a number that I've never.
I remember I asked it at the SALT meeting, and everybody says, "Oh, we have that number," but I've
We
never
don't know
Asked
what it
that
is.
a million times.
Yeah.
So I
don't know
think
what it is.
I think we have a good inventory of deed restricted housing that has been deed restricted by public entities. I think it is more difficult if there's a free market unit that's been bought by a business for the purpose of providing housing to employees and such. If that's the number you're looking for, that is not information that we have as readily available.
I'm
So
wondering
the
if we
three-
could gather that.
Is it difficultly available?
Well, it's pretty challenging because I
Yeah.
tried to gather it to get that estimate of how many voters are in affordable housing. And we were able to identify some of the larger pockets. So we know, like, for example, ACES has employee housing that's not deed restricted, that sort of example. Anything smaller than that, unless you personally know of a business that owns 2 units and that happened to be in our inventory, it's a bit tricky. But on the voter data, we're able to improve it by getting city-owned units, county-owned units, and some of those larger
groups.
SKICO units, things like that. But we're still missing some.
Got it.
It
Can
might
we put an
be a-
ad in the paper that it solicits people? Hey, if you have affordable housing, can you just let us know? We're trying to get a tally.
Just out of people in our voting area or in the valley?
I was just looking at in Pickens County.
In Pickens County. Great.
I
Got
have a
it.
question.
Yeah,
that
go
kind
ahead,
of-
Patty.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that we're missing, that I know is happening, are people who are living in free market rental, that's affordable for a family of like 3 that have a 1-bedroom unit, which is not appropriate for their family, or to have a family of 4 and they're in a 1-bedroom. And those people are affording it because it's a 1-bedroom when they really need a 2 or a 3 bedroom, and they're unable to afford that. And I think that there's a sector of our population who work here and live here, but they're living in conditions that, are really tight, literally.
Right, that's an excellent point. One of the things that when people are raising eyebrows about this, they'll say, you're going to create affordable housing, but you're also creating a need for more employees. So how do we create that balance? I'm throwing it out there because I still wrestle with that. I think we've covered everything else that I had on my list. Thank you. Yeah, everything else are just notes of things we've discussed. So I'm ready to move on. Thank you for indulging me.
I do wonder if I could jump in, if the assessor's office, I think they have a flag in their database related to deed restricted. It seems like you would be incentivized for potentially to let the assessor know that. So I don't know if that's a place where we've drawn data out of.
Yeah, I think on the deed restricted, we feel like we have a good handle. It's where maybe it's been acquired and being provided as affordable housing without a deed restriction. So a business buys it, keeps it free market, but is using it. That's the
What
part
they
I'm
tend to
not
do.
sure that we have a good, but we can check, Kelly, just to see how those numbers match up between the assessor's database and the deed restricted numbers we have.
I just want to make sure, do we have consensus from our board, or at least 3 out of 5 that think that's a worthwhile pursuit? I certainly do, and we'd love to see thumbs up, just so we know that that's important to us, because as Francie said, we've asked for it, and
Find out those
we've
numbers.
talked about,
As best staff
let's
can
do our
yeah.
absolute best to get the absolute numbers. That would be great. Thumbs up or down?
Yeah.
That's a yes from Francie.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes
if
from
you
Patty,
already
yes
have
from
the
me.
data,
Steve's a
it's not
yes.
hard.
Kelly, you're not
Yeah,
sure yet?
I'm good.
Okay, she's
No,
good.
it's all good. Thank
Okay,
you.
she's fine. Okay, so there's direction from the board, in case you guys were wondering. Thank
We
you.
do not know how we're going to do that for you.
Okay,
but we're
well,
gonna
we don't
figure
care.
out
We
our
don't care
best.
how you do
Yeah.
it. Just get it, just get it, bring us the goods. Okay, thank you.
All right, now, are we gonna just move on to the next?
Okay, are we ready to move on, or do you have more for us? Are you?
Oh, no,
you're
we are
I
ready to
think
move
we've
on.
got direction.
Still sitting
Thank
here.
you.
Thank
Why are
you.
you still here?
I'm wondering
Okay,
if we wanna move on.
congratulations, Ashley.
What's that?
That was
I
very
was
dismissive.
Wondering
Yes,
if we
move
wanna
on.
move on or take a break, because we're half an hour, and I know Francie wants to be out of
Francie
here.
wants to cut out. Do you need a
Just-
break?
I'm good, I just
I'm
took-
good.
Okay, we're gonna keep going, you guys, online. You can all take breaks whenever you want. I don't have the agenda in front of me, but I
Let's
think
review a future agenda.
future agendas.
Definitely have a future agendas thing in line with what Patty said about talking next week about a ballot issue about the airport. So we
Great.
need some significant time for that discussion, because it's a big discussion. And it's just us, right? I mean, we can
Inexact.
get facts from our staff, but we need to have time to talk to each other about the airport.
And I think we can talk about it in exec, but we'll need to check with,
You think we can?
John, do you have an opinion on that for us? Is it an executive item, or is it something?
I don't think I should be the one to offer
Okay,
that
dude.
opinion.
Yeah,
If
you're right.
if it's advice of attorney, as
Laura's
far
still here.
as how it relates to grant assurances and such, I believe that you could go into exec, but I definitely want to check with Rye. If
Okay.
it's discussion of specific ballot language, I think it needs to be in public.
So why don't we, at our budget, or at our agenda meeting this week, we'll book time for that. Thank you for bringing it up, Francie.
It's not a violation of the Fair Elections Act to ask for counsel on this issue?
no, because we don't have a question proposed yet.
It's not a question. We're able to support you to the point of that certification of ballot language by bringing information and advising the board. Once it is, in the case of a citizen effort with the petition where that ballot language was certified for petition, that's when our attorneys have suggested staff time should not be spent on it anymore. In the case of the board developing a ballot question, we are able to support the board through the development of that ballot language, but we
not
cannot
the promotion.
advocate
Okay.
for it one way or
I
another.
did get an alternate opinion, though, about how, when we have to start thinking that the Hatch Act and the Fair Elections Act, whatever they're called, have set in. That apparently the advice that it's already in effect was a very conservative advice that really, until there is a ballot question, it may not have to be. I'm just saying, I heard other counsel about that it's premature, that we could be doing whatever right now, but, because there isn't a ballot question yet.
Right,
so.
Kelly has her hand up.
Yeah, I see. Thank you, Francie. That's a good question. Kelly?
Just wondering if anyone remembers off the top of their head what the deadline is for the petitioners to submit their signatures?
I don't know, but I think they're gonna submit on Friday.
I don't. It was 45 days after whatever.
I think they've collected over 800 and something signatures.
They have 820?
I think so.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.
On one ballot issue. They're only
Okay,
doing one.
That's
so there's
That's what I heard last
that. Do we
week.
need to discuss any other future agenda items?
So it does look like we have a short meeting, if I'm looking at the right agenda, for July 23rd. So we have a short meeting right now on future agendas, so we have plenty of time to add that.
So I have,
Right.
I
But
have one.
Can I ask, just real quick, sorry, do we want like an hour and a half for that?
Well, it took us almost 2 hours.
I know, that's,
Let's book an hour and a half, and then if we don't need it all, we can
At
take a break.
exec or in the public session?
We'll have to determine if we can have it in exec. I'd rather do the first discussion in exec for at least an hour.
An hour, I agree. An hour in exec possibly, and then an hour and a half in the general?
You know
Or
what?
an
Let's
hour?
keep the time. If we have extra time, great. It'd be nice to get ahead of schedule.
What do you mean?
Well,
I don't understand.
I'm often behind schedule, so let's book extra time. in
Oh,
the
so let's
schedule.
book an hour and a half.
Yeah, why
for the
not? If we
public-
don't need it, we
makes
won't
them
use it.
look good.
And we
Yeah,
may
yeah,
have
yeah,
public comment.
exactly. Thank you.
You
Okay.
don't have to, it's a work session.
No, it's at a work session.
That's true.
We're still trying to sort things out. We're not ready to.
So I have one for future agendas.
Okay, go ahead.
I would like to, next Tuesday, in executive session, talk about election safety issues that we might want to be considering for the upcoming election for our people in the elections and in the clerk and recorder's office.
And why do we do that in exec session?
Because it's like you don't discuss your security strategic plans in the general public.
Are we ready to
Should be
present
advice from
that?
council.
The council, they'll be ready to present something to us by then?
I think so. I think there's been some discussions going on, but I think it needs to come
So
back
they
to
can
us.
apprise us of that.
But we can run that by Rye too to see if he's,
Are you taking notes on that, John?
Yeah, I'm writing an email to Ryan
I
right
just want
now.
to make sure. Okay,
thank you.
thank you. Okay, I'm going to move us on, if you all don't mind.
Oh, wait, I have another future agenda.
I do
Oh,
too.
go, okay, well,
It says on the one of these days, August 14th, both Greg and Steve are out.
that's right, I'm gone that day.
I'll be gone too.
And that's a date we have discussion about questions on the agendas.
I can try to book in from remote. Steve?
So all of the agenda things say that I am not attending, but I am attending remotely on all those meetings. It says that, including that day, I will be attending remotely.
I don't
Thank
see
you,
that
thanks,
on
Steve.
here. August 14th?
August 14th, it says on the second page, August 14th. It's not at the top of the page.
Oh,
It's at the
it's
very
weird.
end of the page. I know it caught me off guard.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Right, and I can try to do the same, I'm just not certain of it yet.
And I would like to put some time next week as well. Patty had mentioned when Epic presented, that we needed more time to discuss the distribution of this $200,000. I thought we had already had the discussion, and that's when we came up with the $200,000. So if we need a discussion, I would like to have it next week and get it over with and make decisions about how to disperse this money before
Okay,
the
thank you,
year's up
great
and we
suggestion.
say, oh, it's too late.
Can we put that on for next Tuesday? A short day?
I know, John, are we ready?
Well, it's not a short day anymore.
Okay.
But yeah, we
Well,
can
that'd
put
be a
that
good
on
use
next.
of
Thank you.
some time. I think we can go through the ones before us and make a
We have one that day
decision.
too, but at least we have a plan. We don't have to disperse them. We still have to hear everybody
Actually,
out.
Right.
it doesn't make any sense to do it next week because Lift Up is coming in
Yeah.
again on August 6th. So could we do it after Lift Up's presentation on the 6th?
Unless we have anybody else coming in that they're not scheduled yet.
John and I are discussing this. We think that's it.
Okay.
We should ask Charlotte, but we
And
think
do we
that's
have a
it.
differentiation of what's a capital and what's an operating? Are they, because some of them seem to be more shifting to,
Well, the ones that we're talking about right now are just capital.
Okay.
That's it.
well, we need to have something in the package.
Because the $200,000 is specifically for capital, so should we do it on the 6th, John, after Lift Up's presentation?
Yeah, let me,
And we can revise this on Thursday if necessary.
Am I moving too fast for you, dear?
yes, you're moving a little too fast for me.
She's trying to get out of here. Okay, we are a little bit behind schedule. If that's, is that it for future agenda discussion from y'all? It sounds like it is.
I'm good. I don't know if
I don't see
anybody
any other
else-
hands up. I'm going to move us on to department reports. And I can tell you straight off the bat, I don't have much to talk about right now other than one thing. But we'll start with Patty.
I'll let Steve, if you would, since you attended the COG meeting, I'm gonna just bring you up to speed really quick here now about NACO. I presented the two resolutions. The first one is my understanding, I haven't seen the press release to read it yet, John, I just saw it came through.
Okay, yeah.
But I'm assuming that the first one, use of airport revenues off-site went through on the vote, which
That's
was
my
yesterday.
understanding, yep.
So that one is in the workings. I don't know what the process is from here on. I'm gonna be meeting with Jessica again and with NACO staff to find out what the next steps are. The second one, which was about the carbon fee or tax, got pretty slammed, which was not a surprise. But apparently it possibly, and it appears to run in conflict with NACO's platform with that committee group, the Energy and Environment Committee. So instead of having it denied, I asked to withdraw that resolution, to revisit it, to look at the language, to look at the NACO platform that specifically says something about no carbon fee tax. And then to represent that in March at NACO's legislative session in Washington, D.C. And I need the board to direction on this. NACO has asked me, some of the attendees in the Environment and Energy meeting would like me to look into being part of their bigger, not on their main board, which is a president, or chair, vice chair, a few other, but on their voting group, would like me to participate in that for the next year or so. And I'm not sure what I need to do in order to do that, but I needed the Board of Commissioners' support here before I look into that.
I'd support you pursuing that, and I'm just wondering what's the next step for crafting the language?
Well, we're gonna be working on that, John and Jessica and I, to
okay.
see what we have to do. Do we have to amend the platform and the language, or just the language to, to comply with the platform? We're gonna be looking at that over the next couple months and then taking it back in March.
And we'll have plenty of time to consult with people who may have opinions on that.
It looked like there were some people that already wanted to pass it the way it was until this gentleman brought up the platform and he went, wait a minute. And the chair said, well, I don't really know, but I think it'd be wise to say it's not in compliance with the platform. And that's when I said, don't deny it. Let me withdraw it and we'll bring it back.
Great, thanks. Quick thinking on your feet.
I was very quick thinking on
Thank you for that. Can
Thank
I
you.
move on to Francie?
I don't have anything.
Okay. Kelly, do you have a report for us? We're abbreviating today, but if you've got something you want to share.
Real quick, two things. I'll just say, so APSHA they're changing the regs just a little bit. We're proposing the change for regs that will go through a first public hearing tomorrow, which thank you, Francie, for covering that for us, is just changing the process on how tax transcripts are submitted. So people have to submit their taxes and then they have to submit 1 year of a tax transcript that's produced by the IRS to prove that they're the same. And that's pretty standard practice. They're just changing how they're going about doing that. So if you see that the regulations are changing in APSHA, that is the regulatory change that's being discussed tomorrow. And then I know Patty, you had called me and we have a bit of an oops situation going on related to submitting our CCI proposals. And there was some confusion about who was doing what and a bit of who's on first. And I'm trying to catch up to get those over to them. And so apologies for it just got missed by me and others. So sorry about that, but I'm going to take care of it.
Can I tag on to that?
Sure.
I came up with another one. And I talked with Levi briefly, and I was going to bring that up in open discussion, so I'll bring it up now quickly. You know, and looking at the honorariums that we're supposed to be submitting on a quarterly basis for any gifts we get, the limit is $50. It was last reviewed and changed to $50 in 2012, so it's been 12 years. I'm wondering, with the cost of, it's hard to go out to lunch and get a cheeseburger here in Aspen for $50. So maybe that's something we can look into. I think that might be an easy one to get moved forward, but Levi was going to do a little homework to see if that's something we might want to include or add at a later date. I gave him the form that we are supposed to submit, so he had that as a reference document.
Now, I understand the cheeseburger can't be given to you as a gift, but it can be given to you as a reward for good service.
Yes, and if you eat it quickly, it costs less. When you
Previous
slowly enjoy
service.
it, it's really expensive.
And in paradise, it costs more.
So anyway, I just thought that was something that may, because of the cost of anything these days.
Kelly, I wanted to also say you had brought up trying to invite Senator Mobley to come up and visit us, and she expressed an interest in doing that maybe around the 5th of September. So first week of September. The 5th is a Thursday, so it may not happen when we have a regular meeting, but anyway, she may be coming to town, and if there's an opportunity to meet commissioners, we'll set that up. Just wanted to
Thank you, Greg,
let
for
the board
following
know.
up on that. Appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, that's great. I would love to make that happen.
Okay, well, we'll definitely get her with you, no question. I think she'll probably want to go for a hike or at least a beer or both. Steve, are you ready? Do you want to talk about anything?
Yeah, I didn't have a whole lot, but there was something really interesting at the Northwest Cog board meeting. In Dillon, the town of Dillon, have an interesting situation where they had 3 town council people who were basically holding meetings just on their own and making decisions without like properly noticing these decisions, and it had to do with the use of a church group of a town facility, an amphitheater that they have in Dillon. And as a result of all this, the town attorney resigned, handed in her notice, a 2-week notice that she was resigning, and her firm that was representing the town is resigning from representing them, because what these 3 town council people doing were very much sort of unconstitutional kind of things about the separation of church and state. The town council immediately is trying to do damage control and come up with some regulations that would allow them to that the church group could use the property, but they have to follow a procedure that any nonprofit group would have to follow to use the facilities of the town facilities. They wouldn't be given any special preference over any other group. And I suggested at the meeting that the town of Basalt help them with their management of their new bandstand in the town park in Basalt, and Sarah Nadolny was there from the town of Basalt. So I think the Basalt's going to help the town of Dillon actually work out, trying to come up with some reasonable regulations in a real short order, real quickly, to deal with this issue they have with the church group using their amphitheater over there. So it was really an interesting discussion and brought up some constitutional issues, but to me, given the light of their town attorney quitting, it sort of felt similar to our situation where our county attorney left suddenly for different reasons, and it really puts a government entity into a short-term bind, if they all of a sudden don't have the benefit of their counsel So I think that will be an interesting topic to follow to see what happens in the long run, because it has some local implications for here.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, I'm mostly
Yeah, and
concerned
on
that
my
they were
other
having
things, I
meetings
don't
without
really
public
have,
notice.
I don't really have anything else on the other groups right now.
Okay, thank you. Right, I think we've all been drilled on public meetings and quorums by our attorneys and by our staff, so I feel pretty comfortable that our board doesn't violate that, but it's easy to find yourself, thinking about that. So, so far we've been pretty good. I just wanted to say on my reports, CORE is having a 30th anniversary celebration. We'll be honoring one of the founders of CORE, Bill Sterling, who's been there and on the board ever since. And this is on August 14th, and I think our board is invited and others associated involved with CORE. And if anybody's interested, they should contact
What time
CORE.
and where? Because
it's going to be on August 14th in the afternoon at Buttermilk.
We have a regular board meeting that day where we have ballot questions on.
So this will be in the afternoon, later in the afternoon. Regarding, let's see, Board of Health, we had our Board of Health meeting last week. Just a brief conversation about avian flu, and it turns out that unpasteurized dairy is probably one of the the mechanisms for spreading the avian flu at this point. And even though only one person had it at the time of that meeting, I think it was up to 3 or 4 by now. And it's something to be taken seriously. So consider your choices if you're buying unpasteurized dairy, is what our epidemiologist at Public Health says.
So it's bovine avian flu.
It's bovine and avian. Go figure. Which one is it? They were confusing me. RAFTA just received a $34 million federal grant. You probably have already heard that. So we celebrated at the RAFTA board, and just what great work. And Francie and I happened to be in D.C. lobbying for that in March, so we take full credit for that, along with some
Dan attributed it to our charm.
some very talented staff.
No, that's not what I
was with
heard.
us and our representatives in D.C. And that's all I've got for you for today. Any other open discussion items?
I know you're trying to get out of here, but I just want to note for
Time. I'm not in a rush.
okay, note for the board that we are doing some press releases and public service announcements around the Grizzly Reservoir
We just got one.
drawdown. Okay, so they're out ahead of me, which is good. This is not the county's project, but we are receiving a lot of calls and concerns about the sediment load that's going in. Environmental Health and Roaring Fork Conservancy are doing water quality testing. We don't have the results, but we'll be getting those
Who
out.
is releasing the water?
Twin Lakes Canal Company.
Thank you.
Twin Lakes Canal and Reservoir Company is when they're working on the reservoir.
They have people, well, I know why it's happening. I was wondering who's actually doing it.
Oh, you mean the contractor? Like,
No, I meant, is it their responsibility to do it? Does the Forest Service do it?
No, it's the
Twin Lakes
people
Canal
who
Company.
operate the Grizzly Reservoir.
yeah.
The history has been, though, there hasn't. We've ended up doing the communication side of it, so we're doing that again.
I'm gonna go
Great,
check the
thank you.
river.
Yeah, I had an inquiry today wondering what was it, and I said it could have just been the torrential rain last night, but it wasn't. They're actually doing
Did you
some.
have torrential rain up here last night?
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
did.
it's the drawdown. They're getting down to that area where there's
They're trying to let
sediment
the
and silt
They're,
and
they're
stuff.
monitoring
stuff
it, but
out.
the results take a while to
Okay,
come back.
so people should know what that coloration in the river is.
Lots of aluminum and copper too.
We're gonna
as we
mine
get
it.
down there.
No, we're gonna mine it in North Star. We're getting a permit from the Army Corps to mine rare earth metals
Okay, let's see.
and gold.
I think that's it. That I don't have anything else for open discussion, other than that we had I thought, a very successful tour last night, site visit. It was in the papers today.
Good coverage.
Pretty well covered with open space in the city. A lot of interesting conversation about the proposed bridges and the trails to them.
I was surprised by Ward and John's quotes in the paper.
I'll have to revisit those.
We've had 2 letters
Oh,
come
no,
through.
Tories and John's, Tories and John's.
And we just got a letter from Tory about the airport that he's
I
gonna.
read it.
I haven't read it yet,
I
but
asked him, could he please refrain from mailing it until we've had a chance to read it, since we're in meetings all day.
it
Okay,
doesn't look good.
thank you for that.
Just talked to him about not
Yes,
doing it.
I'm going to adjourn this meeting.
Thank you.
Kelly,
Sorry, I have a
before we
question.
adjourn, go ahead.
And I'm sorry, why do we keep canceling E EOTC?
Yeah, really.
Generally, because we don't have quorums.
Yeah, it's a quorum issue that we've had with the city. We as managers are going to be bringing forward some recommended governance changes so that we don't have these quorum issues.
That's what I was gonna say.
I
Can we
would
change the
welcome that.
requirements for quorum?
I think it would be great to be able to send a
Haven't had a
delegate
meeting all
rather
year,
than
have we?
all 5 commissioners.
No, the requirement is 1 meeting a year for budget, but we generally do the
Although
quarterly.
we haven't violated that yet.
Right.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. Thanks for bringing that up. Wouldn't it be nice if EOTC was a little bit smoother, a smoother operation?
Well, fewer participants in order to get quorum would help a lot.
Yeah.
Well, that's I think what we're going to bring back is restructuring the board. So we have our staff working on some proposed changes that we can bring forward to you
I mean,
guys.
maybe we have reps to EOTC from each organization rather than everybody.
I like that idea.
Or we have people that sit on other boards that will participate in other meetings that choose not to.
Okay, thank you all. I'm going to call it. It's over.
Great.
Thanks, Grassroots.